The air in the testing chamber hummed with anticipation, thick enough to choke on. Kai stood at the center of the sterile white room, his palms slick with sweat as he faced the glowing blue interface of the system terminal. Around him, holographic displays flickered with data streams, casting eerie shadows across the faces of the academy instructors who watched from behind a reinforced glass observation deck. Today was the day, the combat aptitude test that would determine his entire future in this system-reshaped world. Kai took a deep breath, the scent of ozone and sterile metal filling his lungs. He was 16, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and a lean frame that belied the hours he'd spent training in secret. For years, he dreamed of this moment. While others in his class boasted of their family lineages or innate talents, Kai had nothing but sheer determination. His parents were low-level gatherers, scraping by in the outer sectors, and he'd clawed his way into the prestigious Arcadia Academy on a merit scholarship. This test was his chance to prove he belonged, to rise above the whispers that followed him like ghosts. "Initiate scan," commanded Instructor Vance, a stern man with a cybernetic eye that glowed red. His voice echoed through the chamber's speakers, cold and impersonal. Kai nodded, placing his hands on the terminal's smooth surface. The interface lit up, tendrils of light wrapping around his wrists as the system began its assessment. He could feel it probing him, analyzing his muscle density, neural pathways, combat reflexes, and latent energy reserves. In his mind's eye, he visualized the results, a glorious B class, maybe even an A if the system recognized his grit. He'd seen the rankings before. B-class fighters got respect, assignments to elite squads, and access to advanced training modules. A-class were legends, destined to become generals or system enforcers. Kai didn't dare hope for that, but anything above C would silence the doubters. The scan took only 30 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Kai's heart hammered against his ribs, each beat a drumroll of anxiety. He glanced at the observation deck, where his classmates pressed against the glass. He saw Lyra, a girl with silver hair and a smirk that never left her face, whispering to her friends. Beside her, Rourke, a hulking brute who'd made Kai's life hell since day one, folded his arms, already sneering as if he knew the outcome. Kai looked away, focusing on the terminal. He wouldn't let them get to him. Not today. Then, the interface flashed. A single character appeared in bold, glowing letters, searing itself into Kai's vision. F. It was red, a violent, mocking crimson that seemed to bleed across the screen. Below it, text scrolled in the same harsh hue. Combat Aptitude Assessment, F Class. Lowest rank detected. Physical parameters substandard. Energy resonance negligible. Combat potential minimal. Recommendation, reassigned to non-combat track. Kai's breath caught in his throat. The world narrowed to that one letter, pulsing like a wound. F Class. The bottom of the barrel. The rank reserved for those who couldn't throw a punch or channel a spark of magic. In the system apocalypse, where monsters roamed and power dictated survival, an F was a death sentence, a brand of weakness that marked you for ridicule or worse. No, Kai whispered, his voice cracking. There has to be a mistake. He slammed his fist against the terminal, but the display didn't change. The red text seemed to laugh at him, taunting him with its finality. From the observation deck, a wave of noise erupted. First stunned silence, then jeers and laughter. Lyra's smirk widened into a full grin. Rourke threw his head back and guffawed, the sound muffled by the glass, but no less vicious. Pathetic, Rourke's voice carried through the speakers as he activated his comm. I knew the gutter rat didn't have it in him. Instructor Vance's expression didn't flicker. He stepped down from the deck into the chamber, his boots clicking on the polished floor. Result confirmed by system arbitration. No errors detected. Kai, you are hereby classified as F-Class Combat Aptitude. Kai's hands trembled. He wanted to argue, to demand a retest, but the system's laws were absolute. Once it rendered a verdict, it was etched into reality. He felt a cold weight settle in his gut, the crushing realization that all his dreams were ashes. He'd be expelled from the combat track, stripped of his scholarship, and sent back to the outer sectors in disgrace. His parents' hopeful faces flashed in his mind, and shame burned through him like acid. Given your rank, Vance continued, his tone dismissive, you are reassigned to the Tamer track. Report to Sector 7, Room 12B, immediately. The Tamer track. Kai had heard of it, a dumping ground for failures. While combat students trained with blades and spells, Tamers were stuck with basic manuals and weak critters, their role reduced to support or beast handling for real fighters. It was a dead-end class, a joke among the academy elite. Most who entered it dropped out within months, broken by the stigma. But sir, Kai protested, desperation clawing at his throat. I can fight. I've trained, let me show you. Vance's cybernetic eye word, focusing on Kai with mechanical precision. The system has spoken. Your physical data is irrefutable. You lack the innate capacity for combat. The Tamer track is your only option if you wish to remain at Arcadia. Accept it or leave. There was no warmth in his words, no room for appeal. Kai's shoulders slumped. He nodded mutely, the fight draining out of him. As he turned to leave the chamber, the laughter from the observation deck followed him like a curse. He pushed through the heavy doors into the corridor beyond, the sterile white walls feeling like a prison. The walk to Sector 7 was a blur of humiliation. Students parted around him, some pointing, others whispering behind their hands. He caught snippets of conversation. F class, can you believe it? Waste of academy resources. Should have stayed in the slums. Kai kept his head down, his fists clenched so tight his nails dug into his palms. Each step was a battle against the urge to run, to hide, to scream at the unfairness of it all. But he kept moving. He had nowhere else to go. Sector 7 was in the academy's basement levels, a dimly lit area with peeling paint and flickering luminescent panels. Unlike the gleaming halls of the combat wings, this place felt forgotten, a relic from before the system apocalypse. Room 12B was at the end of a narrow corridor, its door rusted and slightly ajar. Kai pushed it open, wincing at the screech of hinges. Inside, the room was small and cluttered. Shelves lined the walls, filled with dusty manuals and cracked glass jars containing preserved monster parts. A single desk sat at the front, behind which a weary-looking man with graying hair and spectacles peered at a scroll. He wore a faded brown robe, a stark contrast to the sharp uniforms of the combat instructors. This was Master Elrin, the Tamer track instructor, or as the students called him, the Keeper of Rejects. A handful of other students were already there, scattered on benches. Kai recognized a few faces from the lower ranks, kids who'd been labeled D or E class, their expressions a mix of resignation and bitterness. No one met his eyes as he entered. He was the lowest of the low now, and even here, he was an outsider. Ah, another one, Master Elrin said without looking up. His voice was soft, almost bored. Take a seat. We're about to begin. Kai found an empty spot at the back, sinking onto a hard wooden bench. The room smelled of mildew and old paper. On the desk, Elrin had piled a stack of thin booklets, the basic Tamer manuals. They were cheaply printed, with faded covers showing cartoonish drawings of harmless-looking creatures like glowworms and rock sprites. Welcome, such as it is, Elrin began, finally setting aside his scroll. He surveyed the room with tired eyes. You're all here because the system deemed you unfit for direct combat. That doesn't mean you're useless, just that your path is different. The Tamer track teaches you to bond with and command lesser beings. It's a support role, but an essential one in dungeon crawls or monster hunts. He spoke as if reciting a script he'd given 1,000 times. No one looked inspired. A boy with freckles and slumped shoulders sighed audibly. Today, you'll receive your manuals, Elrin continued. Study them. They cover the fundamentals, how to approach non-hostile critters, basic command signals, and the ethics of taming. Remember, tamers don't fight. They observe, assist, and occasionally pacify. Your goal is to avoid conflict, not seek it. Kai's stomach churned. Avoid conflict? In a world where strength was everything. That was a recipe for being trampled. He thought of Rourke's sneer, of Lyra's mocking smile. They'd never let him live this down. Elrin started handing out the manuals, moving slowly down the rows. When he reached Kai, he paused, his gaze lingering. Kai, isn't it? The F class. I heard about your test. Rare to see a rank that low. There was no malice in his tone, only curiosity, but it still stung. Kai nodded, taking the manual without a word. It was flimsy, barely 20 pages thick. The cover read, Introduction to Taming, for Beginners. He flipped it open, the pages rustling like dead leaves. Inside, simplistic diagrams showed how to offer food to a squeak rat or use a calming gesture on a flutter moth. It was insulting. As Elrin returned to the front, the other students began to whisper. Kai caught Rourke's name, then laughter. He didn't need to hear the details to know they were talking about him. He focused on the manual, trying to block it out, but the words blurred before his eyes. His mind kept replaying the red F on the terminal, over and over, a nightmare loop. Then, something strange happened. As he stared at a page describing passive taming techniques, the text seemed to shimmer. A faint, golden light seeped from the paper, so subtle he almost missed it. He blinked, thinking it was a trick of the flickering lights. But the glow intensified, forming lines of script that floated above the page, visible only to him. System notification, hidden skill detected. The words were in a deep, pulsating gold, unlike the harsh red of his aptitude result. They hung in the air, ethereal and mesmerizing. Kai's breath hitched. He glanced around, but no one else reacted. The other students were still murmuring, and Elrin was droning on about safety protocols. This was for him alone. Condition met. User possesses F-class combat aptitude with undetermined latent potential. Accessing legacy data. More text scrolled, faster now. Kai's heart raced, a wild hope stirring in his chest. Was this a mistake? A glitch? Or something more? Skill unlocked. Absolute submission. The words burned into his vision, bold and commanding. Below them, a description appeared. Absolute submission, a unique taming skill. Allows the user to tame any being with a soul, monsters, spirits, divine entities, upon defeating them in combat. Success is not guaranteed initially, but becomes inevitable after sufficient attempts. Once tamed, loyalty is enforced by unbreakable system laws. No rebellion possible. Warning, skill operates outside standard rankings. Use with caution. Kai read it twice, his mind reeling. Any being with a soul, even gods, and defeat them in combat. But he was F-class. How could he defeat anything? The skill seemed like a cruel joke, a tease of power he could never wield. Yet, the system had acknowledged it. This wasn't in the manual. This was something hidden, something secret. He looked up, his hands trembling again, but this time with a different emotion, not despair, but a fierce, burning curiosity. The golden text faded, leaving only the dull manual in his lap. Around him, the world hadn't changed. Elrin was still talking, the other students still listless. But everything had shifted for Kai. What did it mean? Could this be his way out? His path to revenge? He clutched the manual tighter, the cheap paper crumpling in his grip. For the first time since the test, a smile touched his lips, thin and dangerous. The F-class brand still burned on his record, but now, it felt like a disguise. He had a secret, and secrets were power. As the class dragged on, Kai barely heard a word. His mind raced with possibilities. Absolute submission. The name alone sent a thrill down his spine. He didn't know how to use it, or what it would cost him, but one thing was clear. The system had given him a key, and he intended to unlock every door it led to, no matter who stood in his way. The bell rang, signaling the end of the session. Students shuffled out, but Kai lingered, staring at the manual as if it held the answers to the universe. In the dim light of Sector 7, with the echoes of laughter still haunting the halls above, he made a silent vow. They'd mocked him for being weak. Soon, they'd learn just how wrong they were. And deep in his soul, the skill waited, a sleeping giant, ready to awaken. The morning after his humiliating reassignment, Kai woke to the sound of rain pattering against the grimy window of his dormitory. The room was small and Spartan, a single bed, a worn desk, and a flickering light panel that cast long shadows across the peeling walls. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, the memory of yesterday's red F-class ranking still burning in his mind like a brand. But beneath the shame, a strange warmth pulsed in his chest, the hidden notification from last night. Absolute submission. The words echoed in his thoughts, cryptic yet promising. He dressed quickly in the standard academy uniform, a dark gray tunic and trousers, now feeling like a costume of failure, and made his way through the damp corridors of Arcadia Academy. The building was a sprawling complex of polished stone and glowing system interfaces, but the Tamer track was housed in the basement levels, far from the grandeur of the combat halls. As he descended a narrow staircase, the air grew colder, tinged with the scent of mildew and something faintly animalistic. Kai pushed open a heavy metal door marked Tamer Training Room B7. The room beyond was a stark contrast to the Academy's opulence. It was a large, dimly lit chamber with cracked concrete floors and walls lined with rusty cages. Faint, plaintive chirps and squeaks echoed from within them. Weak critters, as the outline had mentioned. In the center of the room stood a dozen other students, all looking as defeated as Kai felt. They were the rejects, the F-class cast-offs, their shoulders slumped and eyes downcast. Instructor Elrin, a gaunt man with a perpetual scowl, stood at the front. He wore a simple brown robe, and his fingers tapped impatiently on a datapad. "Welcome to your first day of Tamer class," he said, his voice dry and uninterested. "For those of you who don't know, which is all of you, this track is where the system dumps failures. You're here because you can't fight, can't cast, can't do anything useful. But maybe, just maybe, you can learn to handle a few harmless beasts. Don't get your hopes up." Kai clenched his fists, feeling the sting of the words. He scanned the room, recognizing a few faces from yesterday's test. Rourke and Lyra weren't here, thankfully, but there were others who had sneered at him. A tall boy with spiky hair nudged his friend, whispering something that made them both snicker. Kai ignored them, focusing on Elrin. "Today, you'll practice on these," Elrin continued, gesturing to the cages. "Glimmer mites. F-rank pests. They're about as dangerous as a damp cloth. Your task is to use basic taming techniques from the manuals I handed out yesterday. Channel a sliver of your mana, what little you have, into a calming aura. If you're lucky, one might not run away from you." He opened a cage, releasing a swarm of tiny, beetle-like creatures with iridescent shells. They skittered across the floor, emitting soft, glowing pulses. Kai remembered the manual from last night. It had described simple meditation exercises to project a bonding intent. But his mind kept drifting back to absolute submission. Was this skill related? Could he use it here? Elrin assigned them to pairs. Kai was paired with a quiet girl named Mara, who had mousy brown hair and nervous eyes. She gave him a timid smile. "I'm F-class too," she whispered. "Combat aptitude test said I have the strength of a sickly kitten." Kai managed a weak smile back. "Same here. Let's just get through this." They knelt on the cold floor, facing a glimmer mite that had wandered near. Kai opened his manual, reviewing the steps. "Focus your mind. Extend your mana gently," he muttered. He closed his eyes, trying to feel the energy within him. But his mana pool was pitifully small, a trickle compared to the torrents that combat class students wielded. He pushed out a wisp of intent, imagining a soothing connection. Nothing happened. The glimmer mite skittered away, its shell flashing in annoyance. Mara tried next, her hands trembling. She managed to coax the mite closer for a moment, but it darted off again. "It's hopeless," she sighed, her shoulders slumping. Across the room, Kai heard laughter. The spiky-haired boy, Kale, he overheard someone call him, had successfully calmed a mite, holding it in his palm. "See? Even us rejects can do something," Kale boasted, though his voice held a bitter edge. He glanced at Kai. "Hey, F-class, having trouble? Maybe you should stick to punching walls." Kai ignored him, trying again. This time, he thought of absolute submission. He focused on the skill, willing it to activate. A faint ping echoed in his mind, like a distant bell, but no interface appeared. The glimmer might remained indifferent. Frustration bubbled up in Kai's chest. Was this skill useless? Had it been a glitch? He spent the next hour in repeated failures. Each attempt drew more sidelong glances and muffled laughs. Instructor Elrin paced among them, his scowl deepening. When he reached Kai, he stopped, looking down with disdain. "You're not even trying," Elrin said flatly. "Your mana output is negligible, and your focus is scattered. At this rate, you'll never tame anything stronger than a dust bunny. Maybe you should consider dropping out. Save us all the trouble." The words cut deep, but Kai bit back a retort. He nodded silently, his jaw tight. Elrin moved on, dismissing him with a wave. By the end of the class, Kai had made zero progress. The glimmer mites avoided him entirely, as if sensing his desperation. Mara had managed a faint connection with one, but it broke quickly. As they packed up, Kale sauntered over, his mite now perched on his shoulder. "Looks like some of us are just destined to stay at the bottom," he said, smirking. Better get used to it, Kai. Kai didn't respond, shoving his manual into his bag. He left the room without a word, the echoes of ridicule ringing in his ears. The hallway outside was empty, save for the hum of distant system interfaces. He leaned against the cold wall, taking a deep breath. Absolute submission. What was the point of a hidden skill if he couldn't use it? Maybe it was just another cruel joke from the system. But as he walked toward the dormitories, a voice called out behind him. Hey, F-class. Not so fast. Kai turned to see Kale and two other boys approaching. They were bigger than him, with the lean muscles of low-rank combat students who'd been relegated to Tamer track out of spite. Kale's friends, a burly one named Torin and a sly-looking one called Jax, flanked him, their expressions smug. What do you want? Kai asked, keeping his voice level. We saw you in there, Kale said, stepping closer. Can't even handle a glimmermite. Pathetic. But you know, I heard you got that F-class in combat aptitude. That's a special kind of useless. We think you need a lesson in humility. Torin cracked his knuckles. Yeah, a little sparring session. See if you can throw a punch without falling over. Kai's heart raced. He was outnumbered and outmatched. His combat aptitude was F for a reason. He'd never won a fight in his life. I'm not interested, he said, turning to leave. Jax blocked his path. Oh, but we are. Come on, it'll be fun. Just a friendly duel. Or are you too scared? Kai's mind raced. He remembered the manual's warnings about unnecessary conflicts, but these bullies weren't going to back down. He glanced around. The hallway was deserted, no instructors in sight. I refuse, he said firmly, though his voice wavered. Kale laughed. Refuse? You don't get to refuse. But fine, if you won't fight us directly, how about this? He raised a hand, and a soft glow emanated from his palm. I may be in Tamer track, but I've got a little summoning talent. Behold, a minor spirit, something even you might recognize. From the glow, a small, wispy figure emerged. It was a flutter spirit, a common E-rank entity no larger than a bird, made of shimmering light and faint whispers. It hovered in the air, its form shifting like smoke. In the system hierarchy, it was weak, but to Kai, it looked formidable. This spirit listens to me, Kale said proudly. It'll give you a little taste of combat. Unless you want to apologize for being such a waste of space. Kai backed up, his back hitting the wall. The flutter spirit darted toward him, moving with eerie speed. He raised his arms defensively, bracing for an impact. But as the spirit neared, something changed. A sharp ping echoed in Kai's mind, clear and insistent this time. A system interface flickered before his eyes, visible only to him. Target detected, flutter spirit, E-rank. Soul-bearing entity, yes. Combat status, hostile. Absolute submission available. Taming attempt possible upon defeat. Success rate, low, multiple attempts required. Note, loyalty enforced by unbreakable system laws upon success. Kai's breath caught. This was it. The skill was real, and it was activating. The spirit wasn't just a threat, it was an opportunity. His heart pounded with a mix of fear and sudden, fierce hope. He lowered his arms slightly, meeting the spirit's glowing gaze. The bullies laughed, thinking he was surrendering. But Kai was calculating. If he could just land a hit, if he could defeat it somehow, the skill promised a chance. The flutter spirit circled, ready to strike, and Kai tensed, his mind racing with possibilities. The hallway seemed to narrow, the world fading to this single moment. He had failed all morning, but now, against all odds, absolute submission had given him a spark, a chance to turn the tables. Kale sneered. What's the matter, F-class? Keck out your tongue? Or are you finally realizing how worthless you are? The spirit lunged, and Kai acted on instinct, his body moving before his mind could fully process. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that hidden notification right. As the flutter spirit closed in, Kai's fist tightened, and he prepared to meet it head-on, the system's ping ringing like a battle cry in his skull. The flutter spirit hovered inches from Kai's face, its translucent wings beating with a soft hum that seemed to mock his trembling hands. Kale's sneer was a blade against his pride. What's wrong, F-class? Scared of a little spirit? The other bullies, two burly students named Ren and Jax, chuckled, their shadows swallowing Kai in the dim corridor outside the Tamer classroom. Kai's heart hammered against his ribs. The system notification pulsed in his vision, a ghostly blue text that only he could see. Target detected. Flutter spirit, de rank. Soul-bearing entity. Taming attempt available upon defeat. Success rate, 12%. Enforced loyalty, system guaranteed. It was the first time the skill had activated since that cryptic unlock after his aptitude test. His mind raced. What did upon defeat mean? Did he have to fight this thing? The spirit was harmless in combat, but Kale's smug face promised pain if Kai tried anything. Leave me alone, Kai muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. He took a step back, his worn boots scraping against the stone floor. The academy's halls were empty now, the last echoes of dismissed students fading into the evening gloom. Oil lamps flickered in sconces, casting long, dancing shadows that made the spirit's glow seem sinister. Kale stepped forward, his leather jerkin creaking. Not until you admit you're a waste of space. The Tamer track is for losers who can't even throw a punch. He gestured, and the flutter spirit darted closer, its ethereal form brushing Kai's cheek with a cold, tingling sensation. Kai flinched, but something inside him snapped. A spark of defiance he'd buried under years of ridicule. He didn't want to fight. Not here, not now. With a sudden burst of speed, he ducked under Ren's outstretched arm and bolted down the corridor. Get him, Kale shouted, but Kai was already rounding a corner, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The flutter spirit zipped after him, a pale beacon in the dark, but Kai skidded into a side passage and pressed himself against a cold wall, heart pounding. After a moment, the spirit's glow faded, and the bully's curses grew distant. They'd given up, for now. Kai slumped, sweat beading on his forehead. That was too close. He needed to understand this skill, absolute submission, before it got him killed. Pushing off the wall, he made his way to the Academy's library, a towering structure of ancient stone and stained glass that housed centuries of system lore. The head librarian, an elderly woman named Mistress Althea, nodded at him from her desk as he entered, her eyes sharp behind spectacles. She didn't mock him, a rare mercy in this place. The library was vast, with shelves stretching into shadowy heights. Kai headed for the restricted section, a cordoned-off area with books on advanced system mechanics and forbidden skills. As an F-class, he wasn't supposed to access it, but he'd learned long ago how to slip past the wards when the guards were distracted. Tonight, the place was deserted. He found a dusty corner behind a stack of tomes on monster taxonomy and pulled out his basic Tamer manual, comparing it to the system interface in his mind. For hours, he pored over texts, his fingers tracing faded ink. The manual was useless, just beginner tips on bonding with low-level pets. But in a cracked leather-bound volume titled System Anomalies and Hidden Protocols, he found a passage that made his blood run cold. It described a theoretical skill called soul-binding absolute, rumored to exist outside normal rankings. According to the text, it could tame any entity with a soul, but only after the user defeated it in combat. The success rate increased with each attempt, and once tamed, loyalty was enforced by the system's foundational laws. Unbreakable, irreversible. The author, a scholar named Aaron, warned that such a skill could destabilize reality if misused, calling it a cheat that bypassed the natural order. Kai's hands trembled as he read. This was it. Absolute submission. He wasn't just a weak tamer. He had a weapon that could turn the strongest foes into loyal servants. But there were gaps. How did defeat work? Did he need to land a killing blow? Or just subdue them? And what about attempts? The system had shown a 12% chance for the flutter spirit. Did that mean he'd need to try multiple times? He thought back to the bullies. If he'd fought the spirit, maybe he could have tamed it after a few rounds. The idea was intoxicating, but dangerous. If anyone found out. He was so engrossed he didn't notice the footsteps until a shadow fell over his book. Instructor Elrin stood there, his stern face etched with disapproval. Kai, what are you doing here? The restricted section is off-limits to F classes. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of authority. Kai scrambled to hide the book, but it was too late. Elrin's eyes narrowed. That's advanced material. Explain yourself. I was just researching, Kai stammered, his mind racing for an excuse. For the Tamer track. I want to improve. Elrin sighed, rubbing his temples. Kai, I admire your dedication, but some things are beyond your rank. The system assigned you F-class for a reason. Don't waste your time on fantasies. He reached down and took the book, tucking it under his arm. Return to your dorm. And stay out of trouble. I heard about your encounter with Kale earlier. Fighting won't change your status. Defeated, Kai nodded and slunk away. But as he left, he caught a glimpse of Elrin's expression, not just annoyance, but a flicker of something else. Concern? Fear? It vanished quickly, but it left Kai unsettled. Back in his cramped dorm room, a bare stone cell he shared with 3 other low-ranked students who ignored him, he lay on his thin cot and stared at the ceiling. The system interface still hovered in his vision, a constant reminder of his secret. He practiced focusing on it, willing details to appear. After a while, a new line texted, Skill progress, absolute submission, unranked. Next tier unlock, tame 3 entities. Current, 0/3. So he needed to tame things to grow stronger. But how? Without exposing himself. The answer came the next morning. During a dreary lecture on monster habitats, Instructor Elrin made an announcement that sent a buzz through the class. Listen up, he said, tapping a map on the wall. Next week, we'll be taking a field trip to the Whispering Caverns, a low-level dungeon on the Academy grounds. It's part of your practical training. You'll encounter real monsters, up to C rank. This is mandatory for all Tamer students. A murmur of excitement and fear rippled through the room. Kale grinned, elbowing his friends. Finally, some action. Maybe we'll see something worth taming. He shot a glance at Kai, who kept his head down, but inside, his mind was whirring. A dungeon crawl with monsters. This was his chance. In the chaos, he could test his skill without drawing too much attention. The Whispering Caverns were known for weaker creatures, but according to rumors, sometimes stronger ones strayed in from deeper layers. If he could find something alone, maybe a D rank or even C rank. Over the next few days, Kai prepared in secret. He snuck into the library again, avoiding Elrin, and read up on dungeon ecology. He learned that inferno hounds, B-rank fire monsters, were rare but had been spotted near the cavern's volcanic vents. The thought sent a thrill through him. Taming something that powerful could change everything. But it was a long shot. He also practiced his combat skills in an empty training yard at night, throwing punches at a straw dummy. His strikes were weak, his body unathletic, but he focused on endurance. If he had to defeat something to tame it, he needed to last long enough for multiple attempts. The night before the trip, Kai couldn't sleep. He lay awake, going over the plan in his head. He'd stick to the back of the group, wait for an opportunity, and use the environment to his advantage. The system had hinted that success rates improved with attempts, so even if he failed at first, he could keep trying. And once tamed, the loyalty was guaranteed. No one would believe an F-class could control a high-rank monster, but the system logs would prove it. He just had to survive. Morning came too soon. The class assembled at the academy gates, 20 students bundled in leather armor and carrying basic gear. Instructor Elrin gave a stern briefing. Stay together. The caverns are maze-like, and monsters are unpredictable. Your goal is to observe and, if possible, tame a low-rank creature. No heroics. His eyes lingered on Kai for a moment, as if sensing his restlessness. They marched into the forest, the path winding toward a gaping mouth in the hillside, the entrance to the Whispering Caverns. Inside, the air grew cool and damp, the walls glistening with phosphorescent moss that cast an eerie green light. Strange echoes whispered around them, giving the place its name. Kai hung back, as planned, his senses on high alert. The other students chattered nervously, their voices bouncing off the stone. They descended deeper, past stalactites and shallow pools. Occasionally, a glimmer mite or a cave skitterer scuttled by, harmless E-rank critters. Kale and his friends tried to tame a few, with mixed success. Kai ignored them, his eyes scanning the shadows. Then, they reached a large chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. Elrin pointed to a tunnel ahead. This leads to a hotter section. We'll turn back here, but take a moment to note the geothermal activity. As the group clustered near the tunnel, a low growl echoed from within. It started soft, then built into a roar that shook the cavern, sending dust raining from above. Students froze, their faces pale. From the tunnel's depths, a pair of glowing red eyes appeared, followed by a massive, furred form wreathed in flickering flames. It was an inferno hound, B rank, just as Kai had read about. Its fangs gleamed in the green light, and heat radiated from its body in waves. Elrin shouted, "Back! Everyone retreat now!" But the monster was already charging, its claws scrabbling on stone. The students screamed, scrambling in panic. Kai stood rooted, his heart in his throat. This was it, the moment he'd both feared and hoped for. The Inferno Hound's gaze locked onto him, as if sensing his hidden potential. With a final, earth-shaking roar, it lunged straight at Kai, flames trailing behind it like a comet of destruction. The roar that echoed through the whispering caverns wasn't just sound. It was a physical force that rattled Kai's teeth and sent shivers down his spine. The B-rank Inferno Hound emerged from the shadows of the tunnel like a living nightmare, its fur the color of smoldering coals, eyes burning with crimson fire. Each pawfall shook the ground, and the air around it shimmered with heat. Chaos erupted instantly. "Run!" Instructor Elrin's voice cut through the panic, but it was already too late for order. Students scattered like leaves in a storm, their screams bouncing off the cavern walls. Kai saw Lyra, the girl who'd mocked him just yesterday, trip over a rock and scramble back up without looking back. Marcus, the class bully who'd cornered him last week, was already halfway to the exit, not bothering to check if anyone followed. Kai stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs. The Inferno Hound's gaze locked onto him with predatory focus. "Why me?" The thought flashed through his mind, but there was no time for answers. The monster charged, covering the distance between them in 3 bounding strides. "Kai, move!" Elrin shouted from somewhere to his left, but Kai's legs refused to obey. All his research in the library, all his secret hopes about absolute submission, none of it mattered in the face of this raw, primal terror. The hound's jaws opened, revealing teeth like blackened daggers, and Kai could smell the sulfur on its breath. Instinct took over. Not the instinct to flee, but something deeper, born of a lifetime of being pushed down. As the hound lunged, Kai didn't dodge. Instead, he did the most ridiculous, suicidal thing imaginable. He punched it. His fist connected with the hound's snout with a dull thud that sent pain shooting up his arm. It was like hitting solid stone. The monster didn't even flinch. Kai's F-class strength was less than a mosquito bite to a B-rank creature. But in that moment of contact, something strange happened. A blue light flashed between them, so brief Kai almost thought he'd imagined it. Then the system interface, which had been dormant since the test, exploded into his vision. Combat initiated. Kai, F-class, versus Inferno Hound, B-rank. Damage dealt, 0. Condition met. Physical contact with target. Hidden skill activated. Absolute submission. Taming attempt initiated. Kai's breath caught. The words hung in the air before him, glowing with an ethereal light only he could see. The hound had paused, its head tilting as if confused by the sudden energy surge. Around them, the cavern had gone strangely quiet. The fleeing students had vanished, leaving only Elrin standing at the tunnel entrance, her face pale with shock. "What did you do?" Elrin whispered, but Kai couldn't answer. The system interface updated. Taming progress, 1%. Requirements: defeat target in combat. Note: each successful strike increases progress. Failure resets to 0. Current success rate, 0.01%. 0.01%. The number mocked him. But then he remembered what he'd read in the library. Absolute submission guaranteed success after enough attempts. The system's laws were absolute, if he could just survive long enough. The hound recovered from its confusion with a snarl. This time, it didn't charge. Instead, it circled Kai, its intelligent eyes assessing him. Kai could see the calculation there. This wasn't just a mindless monster. It knew he was weak, but that strange energy had given it pause. "Kai, back away slowly," Elrin called, her voice tight. "Don't provoke it further." But Kai couldn't. The taming attempt had been initiated. If he ran now, it would reset to 0. All or nothing. The thought crystallized in his mind with sudden, terrifying clarity. He took a step forward. The hound's eyes widened in what looked like surprise. Then it attacked again, this time with a sweeping claw that Kai barely dodged. The movement was clumsy, his F-class agility was pathetic, but he managed to roll to the side as the claw tore through the stone where he'd been standing. Taming progress, 1.5%. Another flash of blue. The number had increased. Not by much, but it was something. What is happening? Elrin's voice was barely audible over the hound's growls. Kai didn't have time to explain. The hound was adapting, learning his movements. Its next attack came faster, a bite aimed at his leg. Kai tried to jump back, but he was too slow. Teeth grazed his calf, tearing through his uniform and drawing blood. Pain exploded through his leg, and he stumbled. Taming progress reset, 0%. Health, 85%. No, the reset was devastating. All that progress, gone in an instant. But the attempt was still active. The system interface hadn't disappeared. He could try again. Gritting his teeth against the pain, Kai pushed himself up. The hound watched him, its head cocked again. There was something almost curious in its expression now. It could have finished him while he was down, but it hadn't. "Why aren't you killing me?" Kai whispered. The hound's ears twitched. It understood him, or at least recognized speech. B-rank monsters weren't just beasts, they had intelligence. Maybe that was why absolute submission worked on them. They had souls to tame. Kai lunged. It was a desperate, stupid move, but he had to make contact again. His fist connected with the hound's shoulder, another useless blow that did no damage. Taming progress, 2%. Higher this time. The percentage was climbing faster. Maybe because he'd drawn blood? Or maybe because the hound was letting him. The thought was absurd, but as the hound batted him away with a casual swipe of its paw, Kai realized it wasn't fighting to kill. It was toying with him, testing him. Each time he got up, each time he struck back, the hound's attacks grew less lethal. It was like a cat playing with a mouse, but there was purpose behind it. "Stop this, Kai." Elrin had taken a step forward, her hands glowing with defensive magic. "You'll get yourself killed. Stay back," Kai shouted, surprising himself with the force in his voice. "I have to do this." He didn't know why he was so certain, but he was. This was his chance. The one opportunity to prove he wasn't just F-class trash. To prove that the system had made a mistake when it branded him worthless. The hound seemed to sense his determination. It stopped its circling and sat back on its haunches, watching him. The burning in its eyes had softened to a warm glow. It was waiting. Kai approached slowly, his injured leg protesting with every step. When he was within arm's reach, he stopped. The hound could have torn out his throat in that moment, but it didn't move. "What are you?" Kai asked softly. The hound made a low rumbling sound that vibrated through the cavern floor. Then it did something impossible. It nodded. Taming progress, 50%. The number jumped dramatically. Kai's breath hitched. Understanding dawned. The hound wasn't just letting him win. It was accepting the taming. Consent mattered. Absolute submission required defeat, but maybe defeat didn't always mean physical domination. Maybe it meant breaking the will, and this creature's will was bending not to force, but to curiosity? Respect? Kai reached out a trembling hand. The hound watched, unmoving, as his fingers brushed against the fur of its muzzle. It was warm, like sitting too close to a fireplace, but not burning. Taming progress, 75%. "You want this too?" Kai whispered, and it wasn't a question. The hound made that rumbling sound again, deeper this time. Then it lowered its head until its forehead rested against Kai's palm. Taming progress, 99%. One more step. Kai closed his eyes, focusing all his will, all his desperation, all his hope into that single point of contact. He thought of every mockery, every dismissal, every time someone had looked at his F-class rank and seen nothing. He poured it all into the bond forming between them. Taming attempt successful. Inferno Hound, B rank, has been tamed. Bond established. Master pet. Loyalty enforced by System Law Section 7.3.1. Absolute submission. Pet cannot rebel, betray, or harm master under any circumstances. Congratulations on your first taming. Kai's eyes flew open. The system interface faded, but the connection remained, a warm, steady presence in the back of his mind. He could feel the hound's emotions now. Curiosity, satisfaction, and something like relief. The hound took a step back, then bowed its head low, front legs extended in a posture of submission. The flames in its eyes had cooled to embers, warm but controlled. By the system, Elrin breathed. She had come closer without Kai noticing, her defensive magic still glowing around her hands. How is this possible? Kai looked from the tamed hound to his instructor. "My skill," he said, his voice hoarse. "Absolute submission." Elrin's eyes widened. That's not a real skill. There's no record of it in any system database. It's real, Kai said simply. He turned back to the hound. Can you understand me? The hound nodded again, then made a series of soft chuffing sounds. Images flashed in Kai's mind. Not words, but concepts. Fire. Cave. Loneliness. Waiting. You were waiting for me? Kai asked, stunned. Another nod. The hound nuzzled his hand, and Kai felt a wave of affection through their bond. This creature, this B-rank monster that could have killed him in seconds, was now looking at him with what could only be described as devotion. We need to get back to the academy, Elrin said, her voice urgent. The others will have alerted the guards. They'll send a response team for a B-rank sighting. As if on cue, shouts echoed from the tunnel entrance. Torchlight flickered against the walls, and the sound of armored footsteps grew louder. Kai, you need to hide the hound, Elrin said quickly. If they see it tamed. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Kai understood. An F-class taming a B-rank. It would raise questions he couldn't answer. It would make him a target. Can you go somewhere? Kai asked the hound, feeling foolish even as he said it. The hound chuffed again, then turned and bounded toward the back of the cavern. At the far wall, it paused and looked back at Kai, waiting. It wants you to follow, Elrin said, her analytical mind cutting through the wonder. There must be another exit. Kai hesitated. What about the class? The response team. I'll handle them, Elrin said. There was a new respect in her eyes as she looked at him. Tell them you got separated in the chaos. I'll say the hound retreated deeper into the caves. But Kai. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. When you come back, be careful. This changes everything. Kai nodded, his mind reeling. He limped after the hound, his injured legs screaming with every step. As he reached the back of the cavern, he saw what the hound had been waiting at, a narrow crevice in the wall, hidden behind a rock formation. The hound slipped through easily, and Kai squeezed in after it. The tunnel beyond was dark and warm, the walls smooth as if worn by countless passages. The hound led the way, its fur providing just enough glow to see by. After what felt like an hour but was probably only minutes, they emerged into a smaller cavern with a pool of glowing water in the center. The hound lay down by the pool, watching Kai expectantly. Kai sank to the ground, his legs finally giving out. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion and pain in its wake. He examined his calf. The wound was shallow but ugly, already crusted with dried blood. What now? He asked aloud, not really expecting an answer. The hound padded over and nudged a pouch that had been lying near the pool. Kai opened it to find basic medical supplies, bandages, disinfectant, even a healing salve. He stared at the hound. You were prepared for this? An image flashed in his mind. A human figure, long ago, leaving supplies. Waiting. Always waiting. Someone left you here to wait for me. Kai's voice was barely a whisper. The hound laid its head on his lap, and through their bond, Kai felt the answer, yes. As Kai bandaged his wound, his mind raced with questions. Who would have known? Who could have predicted this? And why him, an F-class nobody? But beneath the questions, something else was growing. A fierce, burning hope. He had tamed a B-rank monster. He had proven absolute submission was real. And if he could do this, what else was possible? The hound made a contented sound as Kai finished his bandaging. It was a deep, rumbling purr that vibrated through the stone floor. Do you have a name? Kai asked. The hound chuffed, and an image came, a word in flames. Ember. Ember. Kai repeated, testing the sound. The hound, Ember, nuzzled his hand in approval. For the first time since the combat aptitude test, Kai smiled. It was a small, tentative thing, but it was real. He had a pet, a powerful, loyal companion, and he had a skill that could change everything. But as he sat there in the glowing cavern, with Ember warm at his side, he remembered Elrin's warning. This changes everything. He was no longer just F-class Kai, the Academy's laughingstock. He was a tamer who had done the impossible. And when he returned to the Academy, nothing would ever be the same again. The journey back to the Academy was a silent procession through the whispering caverns, broken only by the steady padding of Ember's paws and the distant drip of water from stalactites. Kai walked beside the Inferno hound, his hand resting lightly on its scorched fur, feeling the heat that radiated from its body like a living furnace. Ember moved with a predator's grace, its head held high, but there was a new softness in its amber eyes when it glanced at Kai. a loyalty enforced by the unbreakable laws of the system. Instructor Elrin led the way, his lantern casting long shadows on the cavern walls. He hadn't spoken since they'd left the hidden cavern where Kai had found the supplies, bandages, rations, and a cryptic note that read, "The system watches. Be ready." Kai's mind churned with questions. Who had left those supplies? Why had Ember led him there? And most pressing of all, how would the Academy react to an F-class student returning with a B-rank monster as his pet? As they emerged from the cavern entrance into the late afternoon light, the Academy's spires loomed in the distance, their polished stone gleaming under a sky streaked with orange and purple. The field trip group had scattered, but word had already spread. A crowd had gathered at the Academy gates, students in their uniforms, instructors in robes, and even a few guards in polished armor. Their murmurs rose into a buzzing chorus as Kai and Ember came into view. "Look, it's the F-class failure," someone shouted. "Is that an inferno hound?" "Tamed," another voice gasped. Kai kept his expression neutral, but his heart hammered against his ribs. He could feel their eyes on him. Curious, hostile, disbelieving. Ember let out a low growl, the sound vibrating through Kai's palm, and the crowd fell silent, taking a step back. Instructor Elrin turned to Kai, his face grim. "Stay close to me," he said quietly, "and let the hound do the talking if it must." They passed through the gates, the crowd parting like water before a ship. Kai caught snippets of conversation. Cheat. Impossible. System error. He focused on putting one foot in front of the other, his injuries from the cavern fight throbbing with each step. The bandages he'd applied were holding, but the memory of the hound's claws tearing into his shoulder was fresh, a phantom pain that sharpened his resolve. The Academy's main hall was a vast chamber of marble and stained glass, where the combat aptitude test had branded him F-class just weeks ago. Now, it was filled with authority figures. Headmaster Valerius stood at the center, his silver hair and stern face framed by the light filtering through the windows. Flanking him were Master Tamer Lyra, her expression unreadable, and Commander Arctos of the System Response Division, a man in black armor with eyes like chips of ice. "Kai," Headmaster Valerius said, his voice echoing in the hall. "Approach." Kai walked forward, Ember at his side. The hound's presence seemed to fill the space, its heat making the air waver. He stopped before the headmaster, bowing slightly. "Headmaster, explain this," Valerius commanded, gesturing to Ember. "An F-class student does not tame a B-rank inferno hound. Not without assistance." Kai took a deep breath. He'd rehearsed this in his mind during the walk back. "During the field trip, the hound attacked our group. I fought it, and my hidden skill, absolute submission, activated. I tamed it through combat, as the system allows." Commander Arctos stepped forward, his armor clinking. "Hidden skill? Show us the system logs." Kai nodded, focusing inward. The system interface appeared in his vision, a translucent screen only he could see. He navigated to his skill list, where absolute submission glowed with a soft golden light. With a thought, he projected the relevant logs into the air, text floating for all to see. Combat initiated. Inferno Hound, B rank. Taming Attempt 1, failed. Taming Attempt 2, failed. Taming Attempt 7, success. Pet bond established, Ember. Loyalty enforced by System Law Section 4.12. The hall erupted into whispers. Master Tamer Lyra studied the logs, her eyes narrowing. "This is unprecedented. The success rate should be near zero for an F-class. But the logs are legitimate. The system confirms it. It could be a glitch," Commander Arctos said coldly. "Or worse, a cheat. The system has been stable since the apocalypse. Anomalies are not tolerated." Headmaster Valerius held up a hand for silence. "Kai, demonstrate the bond. Command the hound." Kai turned to Ember, meeting its gaze. In his mind, he felt the connection, a thread of will that tied them together. "Ember, sit." The Inferno Hound lowered itself to the floor, its massive body settling with a soft thud. It kept its eyes on Kai, waiting for the next command. "Now, have it extinguish its flames," Valerius said. Kai focused again. "Ember, cool down." The heat radiating from Ember's fur diminished, the orange glow fading to a dull red, then to the normal color of scorched hide. The hall grew noticeably cooler. A few students in the crowd gasped. "Impressive," Master Tamer Lyra murmured. The control is absolute. This is no ordinary taming. Commander Arctos wasn't convinced. I want a full scan. If there's any external interference, we'll find it. He gestured to two of his guards, who approached with handheld devices that hummed with energy. They passed them over Kai and Ember, lights flashing. Kai held still, his mind racing. What if they found something? The supplies in the cavern, the note, were they part of a setup? But the scan completed without alarm. One guard reported, "No external signatures, Commander. The bond is pure system work." Headmaster Valerius nodded slowly. "Very well. Kai, your achievement stands. But such power cannot go unsupervised. You will be placed under watch. Report to the Tamer dorms, and do not leave the academy grounds without permission. Ember will be housed in the secure kennels." Kai's stomach tightened. "Headmaster, Ember is my pet. We should stay together. For now, it's a security measure," Valerius said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Dismissed. As Kai turned to leave, he caught Master Tamer Lyra's eye. She gave him a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Was it encouragement or a warning? He pushed the thought aside, walking out of the hall with Ember beside him. The crowd outside had grown, but they kept their distance, watching with a mix of awe and fear. The walk to the Tamer dorms was a blur. The academy's corridors, usually bustling with students, felt empty and echoing. Kai's room was a small, sparse space on the ground floor, with a single window overlooking the kennels. He could see Ember being led into a reinforced enclosure, the hound looking back at him before the door closed. Alone, Kai sank onto his bed, the events of the day crashing down on him. He pulled out the note from the cavern, reading it again. "The system watches. Be ready." Who was it from? Instructor Elrin had seemed just as surprised by the supplies. Could it be someone from within the academy? Or an outside force? His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Lena, a fellow Tamer student who'd always been kind to him, despite his F-class status. Her face was pale with worry. "Kai, are you okay? I heard what happened." "Yeah," Kai said, forcing a smile. "Just a lot to process." "Be careful," Lena whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Some people aren't happy about this. Rylan is already spreading rumors that you cheated." Rylan. Kai's jaw tightened. A B-class student in the summoner track, with a talent for elemental spirits and a deep-seated jealousy of anyone who outshone him. They'd clashed before, but this was different. "Thanks for the warning," Kai said. Lena left, and Kai spent the next hour unpacking his few belongings, his mind on Ember. Through their bond, he could feel the hound's calm presence, like a warm ember in his chest. It was comforting, but also a reminder of the target now on his back. As evening fell, a system notification pinged in his vision. Daily mission updated. Attend Tamer class. Reward, 50 system credits. Kai sighed. Life went on, even after taming a B-rank monster. He changed into a clean uniform, the fabric rough against his bandaged shoulder, and headed to the classroom. The Tamer classroom was in a wing of the academy that smelled of hay and animal musk. Usually, it was filled with the sounds of chittering critters and students practicing basic bonds. Tonight, it was silent. Only a handful of students were present, all watching Kai as he entered. Instructor Elrin stood at the front, his expression weary. "Take your seat, Kai," he said. "We're reviewing intermediate bonding techniques. Pay attention, you might need them." The lesson was a blur. Kai tried to focus, but his mind kept drifting to Ember, to the interrogation, to the note. He practiced on a classroom-provided rockhopper, a small, rabbit-like creature with stone-like fur. His absolute submission skill didn't activate. The creature was too weak, or perhaps he wasn't in combat. He managed a basic bond, the rockhopper hopping into his lap, but it felt trivial compared to what he'd done. After class, as Kai was leaving, a voice called out from the shadows of the corridor. Well, the F-class wonder. Kai turned. Rylan stepped into the light, his arms crossed over his chest. He was tall and lean, with sharp features and a smirk that never quite reached his eyes. Behind him floated a shimmering figure, an elemental spirit of water, its form shifting like a liquid sculpture. It was C-class, but well-trained, and Rylan's pride and joy. "What do you want, Rylan?" Kai asked, keeping his voice level. "I want to know how you did it," Rylan said, stepping closer. "Did you bribe someone? Use a forbidden artifact? Or are you just the system's favorite mistake?" "I tamed it fair and square," Kai said. "The logs prove it. Rylan laughed, a harsh sound. Logs can be faked, but I'll give you a chance to prove yourself. A duel. Tomorrow, in the practice arena. My spirit against your hound. Kai's heart skipped a beat. A duel? With Ember still in the kennels, and himself under watch? I can't. The headmaster. Afraid. Rylan interrupted, his smirk widening. Or maybe you know your luck won't hold. Come on, Kai. Show everyone you're not a fraud. Or slink back to the F-class shadows where you belong. The elemental spirit rippled, as if in anticipation. Kai could feel the challenge hanging in the air, thick with malice. He thought of Ember, of the bond they shared, of the power he'd barely begun to understand. If he refused, the rumors would grow. If he accepted, fine. Kai said, the word leaving his lips before he could reconsider. Tomorrow. But no tricks. Rylan's eyes gleamed. Oh, no tricks. Just a fair fight. See you then, Tamer. He turned and walked away, the water spirit flowing after him. Kai stood in the corridor, his hands clenched at his sides. The cliffhanger of the duel loomed, a jealous rival, a summoned elemental spirit, and a test that could make or break his newfound reputation. As he walked back to his room, the note from the cavern seemed to burn in his pocket. Be ready. He would have to be. The practice arena of the Valerius Academy was a vast, circular expanse of polished obsidian stone, ringed by tiered seating that rose like the teeth of some ancient beast. Today, those seats were packed with students, their whispers creating a low, buzzing hum that echoed off the domed ceiling high above. Kai stood at the center, the rough fabric of his F-class uniform chafing against his skin. Across from him, Rylan smirked, his own B-class robes, deep blue with silver trim, fluttering in the faint breeze that swept through the arena's ventilation shafts. Rylan's elemental spirit hovered beside him, a being of shimmering aquamarine light that pulsed with the rhythm of flowing water. It had no distinct form, instead shifting between shapes, a coiled serpent, a crashing wave, a humanoid figure with eyes like deep pools. The air around it tasted of salt and ozone. Kai's own companion, Ember the Inferno Hound, growled low in his throat, flames licking from between his teeth. The hound's fur, normally of vibrant crimson, seemed dulled under the arena's harsh mage lights, and Kai could feel the tension in their bond, a thread of shared anxiety that thrummed in his chest. Ready to be humiliated, F-class? Rylan called out, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. A few laughs rippled through the spectators. Kai ignored them, focusing on the system interface that flickered at the edge of his vision. It displayed the duel parameters. Combat type, pet duel. Objective, submission or knockout. Restrictions, direct master intervention permitted after first minute. He took a slow breath, the scent of stone and anticipation filling his lungs. Master Tamer Lyra, her expression unreadable, stood at the arena's edge beside Headmaster Valerius. She raised a hand, and the crowd fell silent. Begin, she said, her voice flat. Ember lunged first, a streak of fire and fury. He moved with the speed Kai had come to rely on, claws scraping against stone as he closed the distance. The elemental spirit didn't dodge. Instead, it flowed, its form dissolving into a mist that Ember passed through harmlessly. As the hound skidded to a halt, the spirit reformed behind him, a watery tendril lashing out. It struck Ember's flank with a sound like cracking ice, and the hound yelped, stumbling. Steam rose where the water met fire. Kai's heart clenched. He could feel Ember's pain through their bond, a sharp, cold sting that mirrored his own rising panic. Ember, flank left, he shouted, but the spirit was already moving. It split into 3 smaller copies, each circling Ember with liquid grace. The hound snapped at one, but his jaws closed on empty air as it dispersed. Another copy struck, this time wrapping around Ember's leg like a freezing chain. Ember roared, flames bursting from his body in a desperate attempt to break free, but the water spirit only tightened its grip, sizzling as it evaporated and reformed. Rylan laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. Is that all your legendary taming gets you? A dog that can't even touch my spirit. He didn't move from his spot, arms crossed, confidence radiating from him like heat. The crowd murmured, some leaning forward, others shaking their heads. Kai saw Commander Arctos in the front row, his face a mask of stern observation. Ember was struggling now, the spirit's copies harrying him from all sides. Each attack left patches of damp, cooled fur where the fire had been extinguished. Kai's mind raced. Absolute submission was his only real weapon, but it required him to land a blow on the target, and the spirit was intangible, shifting, impossible to pin down. He glanced at the system timer. 40 seconds until he could intervene directly. Ember wouldn't last that long. Ember, retreat. Kai yelled, but it was too late. The spirit coalesced into a single form above the hound, shaping itself into a massive hammer of solidified water. It slammed down. Ember tried to dodge, but the watery chain still held his leg. The impact echoed through the arena, a wet, crushing sound. Ember collapsed, whimpering, flames guttering to embers. The bond in Kai's chest went cold and thin, a thread on the verge of snapping. Silence fell, broken only by Ember's labored breathing. Rylan smirked. Yield, Kai. Your mud is done. Kai's hands tightened into fists. He could feel the eyes of the Academy on him. The scorn, the curiosity, the disappointment. He remembered the interrogation room, the suspicion in Valerius's eyes, the way Lyra had dismissed him as a fluke. This was more than a duel. It was a test of everything he'd stumbled into. If he failed here, he'd be back in the shadows, just another F-class failure. But Ember was hurt. Through their bond, Kai sensed the hound's fading consciousness, the cold seeping into his fiery core. He couldn't let that stand. The system timer hit 0, direct master intervention now permitted. Without another thought, Kai moved. He sprinted forward, his boots slapping against the obsidian. Rylan's eyes widened in surprise. No one expected an F-class to charge into a duel against an elemental spirit. The spirit turned from Ember, its form rippling as it focused on this new threat. Kai didn't slow. He'd spent the last 40 seconds watching its patterns, the way it flowed and reformed. It was fast, but it always solidified briefly to attack. He just needed one moment. The spirit lashed out, a whip of water aimed at his chest. Kai dove to the side, the whip grazing his shoulder with a sting of cold. He rolled, coming up close to where Ember lay. The hound's eyes were half closed, but they met Kai's, a flicker of recognition in their depths. I've got you, Kai whispered, though he wasn't sure if it was for Ember or himself. Rylan recovered from his surprise, sneering. Pathetic. You think you can fight what your pet couldn't? He gestured, and the spirit shifted, becoming a swirling vortex of water that advanced on Kai. The air grew damp, pressing in on him. Kai backed away, mind racing. The spirit was pure elemental energy, no physical body to strike. But absolute submission didn't care about physics. It cared about souls, and the system had pinged the spirit as a valid target back in Chapter 2. He just needed to hit it. But how do you hit water? An idea sparked, desperate and wild. He remembered the system logs from his interrogation, the way absolute submission was tied to his will as much as his body. The skill description flashed in his memory. Land a blow to initiate taming attempt. Blow may be physical, magical, or conceptual, provided intent is combat. Conceptual. What did that even mean? The vortex was almost upon him, pulling at his clothes with watery fingers. Kai planted his feet, ignoring the fear clawing up his throat. He focused on the spirit, on the core of its being he could sense through his skill, a bright, flowing presence of mana and consciousness. He didn't have magic, but he had intent. He had defiance. As the vortex enveloped him, cold water soaking through his uniform, Kai didn't try to punch. Instead, he reached out with his mind, with the part of him that was connected to Ember and to the system itself. He imagined a strike, not with fists, but with will, a spear of determination aimed at the spirit's soul. He threw everything into it. The humiliation of the F-class rank, the shock of taming Ember, the fear for his pet, the burning need to prove himself. And the system responded. A notification flashed before his eyes, bright and urgent. Taming attempt initiated on elemental water spirit, B rank. Success rate, 5%. Attempts remaining, unlimited. Warning, target is resistant to non-magical assaults. 5%. The number was a punch to the gut, but it was a chance. The spirit recoiled as if struck, the vortex dissipating into a scattered mist. It reformed a few feet away, its light flickering uncertainly. Rylan stared, confusion replacing his smirk. What did you do? Kai didn't answer. He could feel the attempt like a hook in his mind, a connection to the spirit that was tenuous but real. It resisted, a cold, fluid pressure pushing back against his will. He gritted his teeth, pushing harder. The success rate didn't change, still 5%. He needed more attempts, but each one required a blow. He couldn't just stand here and think at it. The system demanded action. He charged again, this time aiming for where the spirit's core seemed brightest. It flowed aside easily, but Kai was ready. As it moved, he pivoted, swinging a fist not at the spirit itself, but at the air where it had been, a feint. The spirit, anticipating an attack, solidified slightly to counter. In that moment of semi-solidity, Kai's will struck again, reinforced by his motion. Taming attempt. Success rate 5%. Progress. 1/20th attempts needed for guaranteed success. 1 down. 19 to go. The spirit shuddered, its light dimming for a second before flaring back. It was angry now, its form boiling into a raging torrent that shot toward Kai. He barely dodged, the water scraping against the stone where he'd been. He could hear Ryland shouting commands, but the spirit seemed less controlled, more erratic. Kai kept moving, a dance of desperation. He ducked under watery blades, leaped over spreading pools, each time trying to time his mental strikes with moments when the spirit committed to an attack. It was exhausting. His muscles ached, his breath came in ragged gasps, and the cold from the spirit's attacks was seeping into his bones. Each attempt yielded the same result. Success rate 5%. Progress, 2/20ths. 3/20ths. 4/20ths. The crowd was on its feet now, the earlier murmurs replaced by shouts of confusion and excitement. No one had ever seen a duel like this, a master fighting alongside his pet, using some unseen force against an elemental. Kai saw Lyra leaning forward, her eyes sharp with interest. Valerius's expression was unreadable, but his fingers tapped against his arm. Ember stirred on the ground, a weak growl rumbling in his chest. The bond warmed slightly, a trickle of strength flowing from hound to master. Kai felt it, a surge of gratitude and renewed determination. He wasn't alone. By the 10th attempt, Kai was bleeding from a cut on his cheek where a watery shard had grazed him. The spirit was slowing too, its movements less fluid, its light flickering like a guttering candle. Rylan was pale, sweat beading on his forehead as he tried to regain control. "Spirit, crush him," he yelled, but the command lacked its earlier force. Kai saw an opening. The spirit, frustrated, had formed into a massive wave poised to crash down on him. It was fully solid for a split second, the commitment to a powerful attack. Kai didn't dodge. Instead, he ran straight at it, into the shadow of the looming water. As it fell, he threw up his arms, not to block, but to embrace the impact. His will struck again, a final, concentrated burst. Taming attempt. Success rate 5%. Progress, 15/20ths. The wave hit him, a crushing weight of cold that drove him to his knees. Water filled his mouth, his nose, his lungs. He couldn't breathe, couldn't see, but he held on to the connection, pushing through the drowning sensation. He felt the spirit's resistance waver, a crack in its fluid defiance. He struggled to his feet, coughing up water. The spirit reformed, but it was smaller now, its light faint. Rylan was shouting, "No! Stop!" But Kai ignored him. He staggered forward, each step a battle. He didn't have the strength for fancy moves anymore. He just walked up to the spirit, which hovered weakly, and placed a hand on its shimmering surface. It wasn't a punch, but it was contact, skin on elemental energy. His will flared one last time. Taming attempt. Success rate 5%. Progress, 20/20ths. Guaranteed success achieved. The change was instantaneous. The spirit's light blazed bright, then softened to a gentle azure glow. It shrank, condensing into a small, orb-like form that floated into Kai's outstretched hand. The cold was gone, replaced by a cool, soothing presence. A new bond snapped into place in his mind, alongside the one with Ember, a thread of flowing water and quiet depth. Elemental water spirit tamed. Loyalty enforced by system laws. Name, Aquilise. Silence gripped the arena, so complete Kai could hear his own heartbeat. Then chaos erupted. Rylan screamed, "That's mine, you thief." He started forward, but Lyra's voice cut through the noise. "Stand down, Rylan." The system confirms the taming. The duel is over. Kai looked down at Aquilise, the spirit pulsing softly in his palm. He turned to Ember, who was struggling to stand, flames rekindling weakly. He walked over, kneeling beside the hound. "You okay, boy?" Ember nuzzled his hand, a low rumble of affirmation. Then Kai looked at Rylan, who was being restrained by arena guards, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. The crowd's noise washed over him. Shouts, questions, awe. But all Kai could think was that he'd done it. He'd turned the rival's own summon against him, not through strength, but through persistence and a cheat skill that refused to quit. As he stood, Aquilise floating to his shoulder and Ember at his side, he felt a new kind of power, not just in his pets, but in the knowledge that every being had a weakness, and his was the patience to exploit it. But the cliffhanger hung in the air, unspoken. What would the Academy do with a student who could steal the very summons of his rivals? And as Kai met Lyra's calculating gaze, he knew the real test was just beginning. The arena's cheers had faded into a tense silence that followed Kai like a shadow through the Academy's marble corridors. In the 3 days since his victory over Rylan, whispers trailed him, a mixture of awe, fear, and suspicion that clung to the air like static before a storm. He walked with Ember padding at his left, the Inferno hounds first still bearing faint scorch marks from the duel, and Aquilise flowing in a shimmering orb of water at his right, its form shifting with quiet, obedient ripples. 2 pets now, both tamed against impossible odds, and the weight of their presence was a double-edged sword. Kai's dorm room felt smaller than ever, the walls pressing in with the memory of Lyra's calculating gaze as she'd watched him leave the arena. She hadn't approached him since, but her absence was a promise of future schemes. He sat on his narrow bed, running a hand through his dark hair, the system interface flickering in his vision. Taming skill. Absolute submission, level 2. The progress bar had inched forward after taming Aquilise, but the details remained cryptic. Success rates improved slightly, but the core mechanics stayed the same. Defeat, attempt, persist until the system's laws enforced submission. It was a cheat that felt less like power and more like a ticking bomb. A knock at the door shattered his thoughts. It wasn't the aggressive pounding of bullies, but a firm, official rap. Kai stood, Ember growling low in its throat, as the door swung open to reveal Instructor Thorn, the Tamer track's weary overseer. Thorn's face was a mask of strained neutrality, his eyes darting between Kai's pets with a mix of curiosity and dread. "Kai," Thorn said, his voice flat. "You're summoned to the headmaster's office." "Immediately." "Why?" Kai asked, though he already knew. The interrogation after taming Ember had been bad enough. Now, with a second anomalous taming, the authorities would be circling like vultures. "The city's under threat," Thorn replied, avoiding the question. "A B-rank dragon has broken through the northern defenses. It's rampaging toward the outer districts. The army's engaging, but they've requested Academy assistance. Specifically you." Kai's breath caught. A dragon? The word alone carried the weight of legends. Massive, fire-breathing, near-invincible monsters that could level cities. B-rank meant it was formidable but not apocalyptic. Still, for someone branded F-class, it might as well have been a god. "Why me?" He pressed, his voice tight. Thorn sighed, rubbing his temples. "Your pets, the Inferno Hound and the Water Spirit. They're assets in a fight like this. And after your display in the arena, certain factions think you might have a knack for handling beasts. Don't get cocky. This is a suicide mission for most. But orders are orders." As Kai followed Thorn through the academy, he felt eyes on him from every shadowed alcove. Students whispered behind hands, some pointing with fear, others with grudging respect. A group of lower-ranked tamers, ones who'd mocked him weeks ago, nodded cautiously as he passed, their expressions unreadable. Alliances were forming in the cracks of his reputation, but they felt fragile, built on fear rather than trust. Headmaster Arcturus's office was a cavernous room lined with shelves of glowing crystals and ancient scrolls. The man himself stood by a wide window, his back to Kai, watching distant plumes of smoke rise on the horizon. He turned slowly, his face grave, lines of stress etched deep. "Kai," he said, his voice resonant but weary. "You've caused quite a stir." "I didn't ask for this," Kai replied, standing straight despite the tremor in his knees. Ember and Aqualise flanked him, their presence a silent challenge. "No one ever does," Arcturus said, gesturing to a map spread across his desk. It showed the city's layout, with red markers clustering near the northern wall. "The dragon, a juvenile frostfang, by reports, has breached the perimeter. Its ice breath has frozen entire blocks, and conventional weapons are barely slowing it. The army's wearing it down with artillery and mage support, but casualties are mounting. They need something unconventional." He fixed Kai with a piercing look. "Your taming skill. The system logs show it's legitimate, but it defies all known mechanics. If you can tame this dragon, even temporarily, it could save hundreds of lives. But if you fail..." He left the threat hanging, the unspoken words heavier than stone. Kai's mind raced. Absolute submission required defeating the target first. How could he, an F-class, take down a dragon? But the outline of a plan began to form. The army was weakening it. If he could land a final blow, just one hit, the skill might activate. It was a gamble with terrible odds, but the alternative was letting the city burn. "I'll do it," he said, the words tasting of ash. Arcturus nodded, a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. "Good. You'll be transported to the front lines immediately. A squad will escort you. Lyra has volunteered." Kai stiffened. Lyra? Of course she had. She was always watching, always calculating. This mission would be another test, another piece in whatever game she was playing. The journey to the northern district was a blur of speed and chaos. Kai rode in an armored vehicle with Lyra and two other students, a burly C-class warrior named Garrett and a nimble D-class archer named Celine. Lyra sat across from Kai, her expression unreadable, her eyes studying his pets with clinical interest. "Interesting companions," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "A fire hound and a water spirit. Opposites, yet both bound to you. How does that work, I wonder?" "The system allows it," Kai replied curtly, not in the mood for her games. Outside, the city flashed by, buildings scarred by ice, civilians fleeing in panic, the distant roar of the dragon shaking the air. Lyra smiled faintly. "Of course, but systems can be gamed. You're proving that quite well." Before Kai could retort, the vehicle screeched to a halt. They'd reached the front lines, a scene of pure devastation. The northern wall was a jagged ruin, torn apart by claws and frost. Soldiers scrambled over rubble, firing enchanted bolts and spells at a massive shape in the distance. The Frostfang dragon was a vision of primal fury, scales like blue-white armor, wings spanning the width of a street, eyes glowing with cold, intelligent malice. Its breath froze everything it touched, turning stone to brittle ice and flesh to statues. Kai stepped out, the cold biting through his academy uniform. Ember snarled, flames flickering around its jaws, while Aqualise condensed into a protective shield of water. Lyra joined him, her own summons, a sleek, shadowy panther, materializing at her side. "Orders are to support the army's push," she said, "all business now. Weaken it enough for you to get close." But Kai, one mistake and we all die. He didn't need the reminder. The dragon was already turning its gaze toward them, as if sensing a new threat. With a roar that cracked the air, it charged, its bulk shaking the ground. What followed was a symphony of violence. Garrett and Celine joined the soldiers, harrying the dragon with attacks that glanced off its scales. Lyra's panther darted in and out, drawing its attention with evasive strikes. Kai directed Ember and Aqualise, fire against ice, water against frost, in a coordinated assault that chipped away at the beast's defenses. Flames melted icy patches, only for new frost to form. Water shields froze and shattered under the dragon's breath. Kai moved through the chaos, his heart hammering. Every second was a dance with death. He saw soldiers fall, frozen solid or crushed under clawed feet. The dragon was tiring, its movements slowing as artillery rounds pounded its hide, but it was far from defeated. Blood, icy blue and steaming, dripped from wounds, but its rage only grew. After what felt like hours, a break came. The dragon staggered, one wing torn by a concentrated volley of spells. It roared in pain, its breath faltering. This was the moment. Kai's skill pinged in his vision. Target weakened, taming attempt viable. The success rate was a dismal 2%, but it was there. "Cover me," Kai shouted, sprinting forward. Ember and Aqualise surged ahead, drawing the dragon's attention with a combined blast of fire and water. Lyra's panther leapt, clawing at its eyes. The beast swiped, missing by inches, and Kai dove under its belly, his hands scrabbling for purchase on the icy scales. He could feel the cold seeping into his bones, the dragon's heartbeat a thunderous drum against his palms. With all his strength, pitiful for an F-class, but fueled by desperation, he slammed his fist into a wounded patch of scale. The impact jarred his arm, but it was enough. Taming attempt initiated, success rate, 2%. The world narrowed to the system's interface, a mental battle as fierce as the physical one. He focused, pushing his will against the dragon's primal soul. It resisted, a torrent of frost and fury that threatened to overwhelm him. First attempt, failure. Second, failure. Each rejection was a spike of pain behind his eyes, but he gritted his teeth and tried again. Third, fourth, fifth, the dragon thrashed, nearly throwing him off. Lyra's voice cut through the noise. Kai now? It's focusing on you. The dragon's head swung down, jaws gaping, frost gathering in its throat. Kai had seconds. He poured everything into one more attempt, his vision blurring with strain. Attempt 6, success rate 2%. Calculating. Success. But it wasn't over. The dragon roared, not in submission, but in defiance. The taming had initiated, but the bond was fragile, unstable. It shook itself, and Kai was thrown clear, skidding across the frozen ground. He looked up, dazed, as the beast loomed over him, its eyes locking onto his with murderous intent. Bond incomplete, target resisting. It raised a claw, poised to crush him. Ember and Aqualise were too far, Lyra and the others pinned down. Kai scrambled back, his skill screaming in his mind, the connection straining like a frayed rope. The dragon's roar echoed, a promise of annihilation, as its shadow fell over him. The Frostfang dragon's shadow fell over Kai like a shroud of impending death. Its massive head, scarred from the army's assault, loomed mere feet above him, each breath exhaling plumes of frost that crystallized the ground around his prone form. Pain radiated from his ribs where the dragon's tail had struck moments before, and the incomplete taming bond pulsed in his mind like a frayed wire, connected but unstable, whispering promises of power that slipped through his mental grasp. Kai. Lyra's voice cut through the battlefield's chaos from 30 yards away, where she knelt beside a wounded soldier. Her face was pale, streaked with dirt and concern. Get up. He couldn't. Not yet. The dragon's resistance was a physical weight pressing against his consciousness. Through the bond, he sensed its rage, a primal, territorial fury amplified by pain and humiliation. This wasn't like taming Ember the Inferno Hound or Aqualise the Water Spirit. Those had been creatures of instinct, their wills simpler to override. The Frostfang dragon possessed ancient intelligence, a stubborn pride that fought his absolute submission, skill with every fiber of its being. System notifications flickered at the edge of his vision, red text bleeding into reality. Taming attempt progress, 42%. Bond stability low. Warning, target resistance exceeding threshold. Ember. Aqualise. Distracted. Kai gasped the command through clenched teeth, pushing himself up on one elbow. His two pets responded instantly. Ember, the B-rank Inferno Hound, lunged from the left, flames erupting from its maw to scorch the dragon's flank. The Frostfang roared, turning its attention momentarily from Kai to swat at the hound with a clawed wing. At the same moment, Aqualise materialized as a swirling vortex of water, drenching the dragon's head and momentarily blinding it with icy spray. The distraction bought Kai precious seconds. He scrambled backward, his boots slipping on frozen mud. Around him, the battlefield was a tableau of destruction. The city's northern wall lay breached in two places, stone rubble scattered like broken teeth. Soldiers of the city guard fought in disciplined formations, their enchanted weapons glowing against the dragon's scales, but their attacks were growing desperate. Captain Valerius, the grizzled commander who'd reluctantly accepted Kai's help, bellowed orders from atop a makeshift barricade, his armor dented and frost-coated. Focus your fire on its legs. Valerius shouted. Don't let it take flight again. Arrows and spells peppered the dragon's hindquarters, but its scales deflected most with a sound like ringing steel. Kai's mind raced. The taming attempt was progressing. Each second of contact, each moment the dragon's attention was divided, increased the percentage in his system interface, but too slowly. At this rate, the bond would stabilize only after the city was rubble and everyone here was dead. He needed to land another hit. Absolute submission required combat dominance, however symbolic. His previous strike, a desperate punch to the dragon's snout as it reared, had initiated the attempt, but to cement control, he needed to demonstrate superiority again. "Lyra," Kai called, his voice raw. "I need an opening." She understood immediately. Lyra's hands moved in intricate patterns, her A-class mage abilities manifesting as shimmering blue energy. "Ice lance formation," she cried, and a dozen spears of magical ice materialized in the air, hovering for a heartbeat before shooting toward the dragon's eyes. The frostfang reared back, batting at the projectiles with its forelimbs. In that moment of vulnerability, Kai charged. Every instinct screamed at him to flee. He was F-class in combat aptitude, his physical stats barely above a normal human's. Against a dragon that could level buildings, he was an insect. But absolute submission thrummed in his veins, a cheat skill that defied the system's intended hierarchy. He ducked under a sweeping tail, rolled past a gout of frost breath that froze the ground where he'd stood, and came up within striking distance of the dragon's front leg. The limb was as thick as a tree trunk, scaled in iridescent blue-white. A deep wound wept dark blood where the army's ballistae had struck earlier. Kai didn't hesitate. He drew the short sword he'd been issued for the mission, a basic weapon, unenchanted, practically useless against such a creature, and drove it into the wound with all his strength. The blade sank inches into flesh. The dragon's roar shook the earth, a sound of pure agony and outrage. Kai was thrown back by the convulsive movement, landing hard on his side. But the system pinged triumphantly. Taming attempt progress, 67%. Bond stability, medium. Success rate, 18%. It wasn't enough. The dragon's focus snapped back to him, its eyes burning with murderous intent. The bond wavered, the dragon's will pushing back against his influence. In his mind's eye, Kai saw flashes of the creature's memories, soaring over mountain ranges older than human civilization, hoarding treasures in glacial caves, a lifetime of unchallenged dominance. This was no mere monster to be collared. It was a sovereign of the wilds. "You will not break me," Kai whispered, not to the dragon, but to himself. He thought of the academy's mockery, the bullies who'd spat on him, the instructors who'd written him off as garbage. He thought of Headmaster Arcturus's cold eyes when assigning him this suicide mission. Most of all, he thought of the system that had branded him F-class, trying to dictate his worth. He pushed back through the bond, not with brute force, but with relentless persistence. Absolute submission didn't require overwhelming power, it required unwavering will. The system's laws enforced it. If he could defeat a being in combat, however narrowly, and maintain the attempt through enough iterations, success became inevitable. It was a glitch in reality, a loophole he'd learned to exploit through painful trial. Again, he shouted to his pets. Ember and Aqualise redoubled their efforts. The Inferno hounds circled, breathing fire in controlled bursts to heat the dragon's scales, causing them to contract painfully. Aqualise summoned a localized rainstorm, the water freezing on contact with the dragon's body, weighing down its wings. The combined assault was harassment, not true damage, but it kept the creature off balance. Kai rose, ignoring the protest of his injuries. He felt blood trickle from his temple where he'd hit the ground. His mana was dangerously low, sustaining 2 active tamings while attempting a third strained even his unique skill. But he had no choice. He ran straight at the dragon. This time, it was ready. A clawed foot slammed down, missing him by inches as he dove sideways. Frost breath followed, and he rolled behind a chunk of fallen masonry, the cold seeping through his clothes. He was running out of time. The army's attacks were slowing, their mana and stamina depleted. Lyra's spells came less frequently, her reserves nearly empty. Taming attempt progress, 79%. Bond stability, high. Success rate, 34%. The numbers climbed, but too slowly. The dragon was adapting, learning to split its attention between the physical threats and the mental invasion. Kai felt its will hardening like permafrost. Then an idea struck him, a reckless, insane idea born of desperation. He reached out through the bond, not to dominate, but to communicate. He sent an image, not of submission, but of alliance. The dragon, soaring beside him over a world reshaped. Treasures beyond imagining. Freedom from the pain of its wounds. A partnership, not slavery. For a heartbeat, the dragon hesitated. Its rage flickered, replaced by curiosity. In that moment of connection, Kai saw deeper into its soul. This Frostfang wasn't rampaging mindlessly. It had been driven from its territory by something worse, something that left it wounded and desperate. The attack on the city was a cornered beast's last stand. Kai modified his approach. He didn't just push, he offered. Through the bond, he promised healing, safety, vengeance against whatever had wronged it. Taming attempt progress, 91%. Bond stability, very high. Success rate, 67%. Almost there. The dragon's resistance crumbled, not from defeat, but from a grudging acceptance. Kai stepped out from behind the rubble, weaponless, hands raised. He met the dragon's gaze, and for the first time, he didn't see a monster. He saw a potential ally. "I can help you," he said aloud, his voice steady. "But you must yield." The Frostfang stared down at him, its breath frosting the air. The battlefield had fallen silent, soldiers and students alike holding their breath. Even Ember and Aquilise paused, sensing the shift. Then, with a sound like grinding glaciers, the dragon lowered its head until its snout rested on the ground before Kai. A gesture of surrender. Taming attempt successful. New pet acquired. Frostfang dragon, A rank. Bond established. Unbreakable. Skill level up. Absolute submission, intermediate. The system notifications flashed gold, triumphant. A wave of energy washed over Kai, healing his injuries, replenishing his mana. The bond snapped into place, solid and unyielding. In his mind, he felt the dragon's presence, ancient, proud, but now loyal. He could sense its thoughts, acceptance, curiosity, and a lingering wariness. Kai placed a hand on the dragon's snout. The scales were cold, but not unpleasantly so. "I name you Glacies," he said softly. A rumble of acknowledgement echoed through the bond. Around them, the silence broke into cheers. Soldiers lowered their weapons, some collapsing in exhaustion. Lyra ran to Kai's side, her eyes wide with awe. "You did it," she breathed. "You actually tamed a dragon." Captain Valerius approached, his expression unreadable. "The city owes you a debt, Tamer. I won't pretend to understand how, but you saved us." He glanced at Glacies, who watched him with slitted eyes. "What now?" "Now we heal the wounded and secure the breach," Kai said, surprised at the authority in his own voice. "Glacies will help." Through the bond, he directed the dragon to use its frost breath to temporarily seal the gaps in the wall, creating barriers of ice that would hold until proper repairs could be made. Glacies complied, its movements now deliberate rather than destructive. The sight of a dragon working to defend the city was surreal, but the system's enforcement of the taming bond left no room for disobedience. For the next hour, Kai coordinated the cleanup effort. His reputation among the soldiers transformed from suspicious anomaly to respected leader. Even Lyra looked at him with new respect, though her expression held a hint of concern. "Kai," she said quietly as they supervised the evacuation of the wounded. "This is unprecedented. The Academy, the system authorities, they're going to have questions." "I know," he replied. He'd considered that. Taming an A-rank dragon wasn't something that could be hidden or explained away as luck. His absolute submission skill was no longer a secret quirk, it was a world-altering power. As if summoned by his thoughts, the air above the battlefield shimmered. A portal tore open, not the ragged rift of a monster's emergence, but a clean, geometric aperture of glowing blue light. From it stepped 3 figures clad in sleek silver armor that seemed to drink the light around them. Their faces were obscured by helmets that displayed shifting data streams. System enforcers. Every soldier froze. Even Captain Valerius paled. The enforcers were rarely seen, elite agents of the system itself, tasked with maintaining balance and eliminating anomalies. Their presence meant something had violated fundamental laws. The lead enforcer's voice echoed, synthesized and devoid of emotion. "Kai, Designation F-Class Combat Aptitude, Tamer Track. You are identified as a system anomaly. Your skill, absolute submission, exceeds permitted parameters and threatens structural integrity. Kai's heart hammered against his ribs. He stood his ground, glacies shifting protectively behind him. Ember and Aqualise took flanking positions, their forms tense. The enforcer continued. By authority of the system core, you are ordered to submit for immediate containment and skill neutralization. Resistance will be met with lethal force. Lyra stepped forward. You can't do this. He just saved the city. The enforcer didn't acknowledge her. Its helmet focused on Kai. Compliance is mandatory. Kai met its gaze, his mind racing. He'd expected scrutiny, but not this, not outright condemnation. The system that had given him this power now sought to take it away. But he'd come too far to be erased. He reached out through his bonds, feeling the steadfast loyalty of his pets. Glacies' ancient strength, Ember's fiery devotion, Aqualis's fluid adaptability. They were his now, irrevocably. No, Kai said, the word quiet but carrying across the silent battlefield. I won't submit. The enforcers raised their hands, energy crackling around them. Then you will be eliminated. Glacies roared, a challenge that shook the very air. Kai braced himself, absolute submission, humming in readiness. He'd tamed monsters, spirits, and a dragon. Now he faced the system itself. But before the first blow could be struck, another portal ripped open. This one dark, chaotic, and smelling of ozone. From it stumbled a figure in tattered robes, their face hidden by a hood. They raised a hand, and a dome of shimmering energy erupted around Kai and his pets, deflecting the enforcer's initial attack. Run, boy! The stranger shouted, their voice raspy with urgency. They'll never stop hunting you now. The enforcers turned their attention to the newcomer, giving Kai a split-second opening. He didn't hesitate. With a mental command, he mounted Glacies, pulling Lyra up behind him. Ember and Aqualise leaped to follow as the dragon's wings beat, lifting them into the air just as the enforcers shattered the energy dome. After them, the lead enforcer commanded, but Glacies was already accelerating, diving toward the wilderness beyond the city walls. Kai looked back once, seeing the enforcers preparing pursuit, the city shrinking below, and the mysterious stranger vanishing into another portal. He had no allies left within the system's grace. He was an anomaly, a fugitive, but he had his pets, and he had a power that could tame gods. The hunt had begun. The wind howled through the frostwoods like a chorus of lost spirits, biting through Kai's thin academy uniform with relentless precision. He huddled against Glacies' massive, scaled side, the dragon's body radiating a gentle warmth that fought back the encroaching chill of the northern wilderness. Around them, the forest was a monochrome tapestry of white snow and gray bark, the skeletal branches of ancient pines clawing at a sky the color of tarnished silver. Kai's breath fogged in the air as he watched Lyra tend to Ember, his inferno hound. The fiery creature lay curled on a bed of pine needles, its usual vibrant orange flame subdued to a dull, flickering amber. The flight from the city had drained them all, not just physically, but in that deeper, soul-weary way that came from being hunted. System anomaly. The words echoed in Kai's mind, sharp and cold as the ice forming on Glacies' nostrils. He'd seen the enforcers' faces, blank, emotionless masks beneath their silver helmets, their voices flat with the absolute certainty of the system's authority. They hadn't even drawn weapons when they declared his capture. They'd simply stated it as fact, as inevitable as gravity. The stranger's intervention had been a blur, a flash of dark robes, a shimmering portal that swallowed them whole, and then this frozen nowhere. How's he doing? Kai asked, his voice raspy from disuse. Lyra glanced up, her fingers tracing the faint scars along Ember's flank. Tired, but stable. The cold suppressing his fire essence, but it's not harming him. Just dampening. She paused, her eyes meeting Kai's. We can't stay here forever, Kai. The enforcers have tracking protocols. They'll find us. I know. Kai pushed himself to his feet, his joints protesting. The snow crunched under his boots as he walked to where Arya, the elemental spirit he'd tamed from his rival, floated near a frozen stream. The spirit was a wisp of shimmering blue light, its form constantly shifting between water droplets and faint mist. It hummed softly, a sound like distant wind chimes. Kai reached out, and Arya drifted to his palm. The bond thrummed between them, a connection enforced by the system's unbreakable laws. Yes, but over the past weeks, it had grown into something more. He could feel Arya's curiosity about the frost-kissed leaves, its faint unease at the unnatural silence of these woods. "We need to get stronger," Kai murmured, more to himself than anyone. "The enforcers won't give up. And next time, that stranger might not be around to save us." He closed his eyes, pulling up his system interface. The familiar blue holographic screen flickered to life, hovering in his vision. Most of it was standard. His name, his still laughable F-class combat aptitude glowing in mocking red. But below that, the section that mattered. Tamed entities asterisk. Ember, Inferno Hound, B rank. Arya, Water Elemental Spirit, C rank. Glacies, Frostfang Dragon, A rank. Skill, Absolute Submission. Level, 3. Success rate boost, plus 15% per attempt after initial failure. Max tamed entities, 5. He'd leveled the skill twice since taming Glacies, the system granting incremental upgrades as he used it. But it still felt crude, unrefined, like wielding a sledgehammer when he needed a scalpel. "Glacies," Kai said, turning to the dragon. "Can you hunt? We need food, and I want to see how you move in this terrain." The dragon lifted its head, ice-blue eyes regarding him with ancient intelligence. A low rumble vibrated through its chest, and it unfurled its wings. Each spanned twice Kai's height, the membrane thin as parchment but tough as steel. With a gust of snow, Glacies took to the air, its movements surprisingly graceful for such a massive creature. It circled once, then dove into the treeline, disappearing behind a ridge. "You're training them," Lyra observed, coming to stand beside him. "Not just as pets, as a unit." Kai nodded. "The enforcers work in squads. Synchronized. If we're going to survive, we can't just be a boy and his monsters. We need to be more." He spent the next hours drilling with Ember and Arya. At first, it was clumsy. Ember's fire blasts melted patches of snow, sending up clouds of steam that obscured everything. Arya's water tendrils would freeze mid-air in the cold, becoming brittle shards. But slowly, patterns emerged. Kai discovered that if Arya enveloped Ember's flames in a thin sheath of water, the attacks became superheated steam bursts, less destructive than pure fire, but with better range and control. He had Ember practice flanking maneuvers while Arya provided covering mist, their movements growing more coordinated with each attempt. His system interface pinged. Skills synergy discovered. Hydrothermal assault. Effect. Combined attacks from fire and water entities gain plus 20% area effect and lingering damage. A small victory, but it sent a thrill through Kai. This was it. Not just taming, but mastering. Understanding how his pets could work together, how their strengths could cover each other's weaknesses. Glacies returned as the weak sun began to dip below the treeline, dragging the carcass of a massive ice elk in its jaws. The dragon dropped it near their makeshift camp, then settled, watching as Kai butchered the meat with a conjured water blade from Arya. They ate in silence. The only sounds the crackle of embers controlled fire cooking the meat and the endless wind. It was during the second watch, with Lyra asleep against Glacies and the moon a pale sliver overhead, that the stranger appeared. One moment, the clearing was empty. The next, a figure stood at the edge of the firelight, wrapped in robes of deep gray that seemed to drink the shadows. No footsteps had announced their approach. No rustle of fabric. They were just there. Kai was on his feet instantly, Ember growling at his side, flames flickering to life. Arya condensed into a defensive sphere around him, while Glacie's head lifted, a low warning rumble building in its throat. "Peace," the stranger said, their voice neutral, genderless. "If I meant harm, you'd already be dead." "Who are you?" Kai demanded, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Why did you help us?" The figure stepped closer, and the firelight revealed a face obscured by a hood, only the lower half visible, a mouth set in a thin, unreadable line. "You may call me Weaver, and I help because you interest me, Kai of the F-class." "How do you know my name?" "The system knows everything," Weaver said, tilting their head. "And those who know how to listen can hear its whispers. Your skill, absolute submission. It shouldn't exist. It breaks too many rules. Kai's grip tightened. Are you with the enforcers? No. I am adjacent. I study the system's anomalies. Its glitches. Its cheats. Weaver gestured vaguely. Your ability to tame any soul-bearing entity. It's not just rare. It's theoretically impossible. The system has safeguards against such absolute control. And yet, here you are. Lyra had woken, her hand on the dagger at her belt. What do you want? To offer knowledge, Weaver said simply. You're training them, trying to create synergies. But you're thinking too small. Absolute submission is a cheat skill, Kai. One of several hidden within the system's code. And like any cheat, it has parameters that can be optimized. Kai forced himself to breathe slowly. Optimized how? Weaver's hand emerged from their robes, fingers long and pale. They made a subtle gesture, and Kai's system interface flickered, new lines of text scrolling past his vision. Hidden skill data unlocked. Absolute submission, deep analysis asterisk. Success rate scales not just with attempts, but with target's emotional state. Fear, despair, awe, all increase odds. Tamed entities can share minor skill fragments with each other through the bond. Maximum entities limit can be bypassed with sufficient system corruption points. Kai stared, his mind reeling. System corruption points? What are those? Every time you use a cheat skill, you strain the system's integrity, Weaver explained. It leaves fractures. Most users never accumulate enough to matter. But you, with your repeated taming attempts, you're creating a cascade. Given time, you could unlock higher tiers of your ability. More entities. Stronger enforcement. Perhaps even. They trailed off. Even what? Lyra pressed. Weaver's hood shifted as if they were smiling. Even the ability to tame things that were never meant to be tamed. Concepts. Abstract entities. The system itself. The words hung in the frozen air, heavier than the snow beginning to fall. Kai felt a cold that had nothing to do with the weather seep into his bones. Tame the system? The thought was madness. Blasphemy. And yet, hadn't he already done the impossible? An F-class taming an A-rank dragon. Defying enforcers? Why tell me this? Kai asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Because the system is not infallible, Weaver said. It's a tool, built by hands long forgotten. And tools can be repurposed. You have a unique opportunity, Kai. You could remain a fugitive, hiding in the wilds until the enforcers eventually corner you. Or you could learn to wield your cheat not as a blunt instrument, but as a key. A key to doors no one else even knows exist. They reached into their robes again, withdrawing a small, crystalline data shard. It glowed with a soft, internal light. This contains coordinates. A place where other anomalies have gathered. Where you can learn, grow, and perhaps find allies. The enforcers won't look for you there. It's outside their jurisdiction. Kai hesitated, his eyes darting to Lyra, to his pets. Ember's flames had steadied, watching Weaver with wary intelligence. Arya pulsed slowly. Glacey's gaze was unblinking. What's the catch? Lyra asked, ever the pragmatist. No catch, Weaver said. Only a choice. Take the shard, follow the path, and see how deep the rabbit hole goes. Or stay here, and let your story end in these frozen woods. Either way, our business is concluded. They placed the shard on a flat stone near the fire, then stepped back into the shadows. One more thing, Kai. Your skill, it's not the only cheat in the system. I've encountered others. Abilities that manipulate probability, that rewrite local reality, that borrow power from future selves. The system is riddled with them, like worms in an apple. And those who control these cheats, they're already moving. They've seen your emergence. They're watching. With that, Weaver melted into the darkness, leaving only the faint impression of footprints in the snow that vanished as Kai blinked. He stood there for a long time, the shard glowing mockingly on the stone. The wind picked up, howling through the pines. Somewhere in the distance, a creature screamed, a sound of pure, primal terror. Lyra moved to his side. Do you trust them? No, Kai said honestly. But do we have a choice? He picked up the shard. It was warm in his hand, vibrating with a faint energy. His system interface pinged again. Anomalous data, shard acquired. Coordinates logged, the glitch haven. Warning, location exists in system blind spot. Proceed with caution. Kai looked at his pets, at Ember's loyal flames, Arya's shimmering form, Glacey's imposing presence. Then at Lyra, who had followed him into exile without hesitation. We go. he said, his voice firm now. We learn. We get stronger. He met Lyra's eyes. And then we show the enforcers, show everyone, what an F-class with a cheat can really do. As they packed their meager camp, Kai couldn't shake Weaver's final words. Other cheats. Other users. A whole hidden world within the system, a shadow where he'd stumbled into blind. The snow fell harder, blanketing the frostwoods in silence. But in Kai's mind, a storm was brewing. And for the first time since he'd been branded F-class, he felt not fear, but a fierce, burning anticipation. He had a key now, and he intended to unlock every door in his path. The frostwoods whispered with secrets as Kai followed Weaver through the dense, snow-dusted pines. His breath misted in the frigid air, each step crunching on frozen needles. Ember, his inferno hound, padded silently beside him, her fiery coat casting flickering shadows that danced across the bark. Arya, the elemental spirit he'd tamed from his rival, floated as a shimmering orb of water and air, while Glacis, the dragon, remained camouflaged in the treetops, her icy scales blending with the winter canopy. Kai's mind raced with Weaver's revelations, hidden cheats, system corruption, and the promise of enhancing his absolute submission skill. Weaver, a figure cloaked in shifting gray fabric that seemed to absorb light, paused at the edge of a clearing. His voice was a low hum, barely audible over the wind. The Glitch Haven is near. It's a refuge for anomalies like us, those the system deems errors. But be cautious, Kai. Not all here are allies. Kai nodded, his fingers tightening around the data shard Weaver had given him. It pulsed with a soft blue light, its coordinates etched into his mind. You said I can increase my taming success rates. How? Weaver turned, his face obscured by shadows, but Kai sensed a smile. By exploiting emotions. The system's laws enforce loyalty, but they're tied to the target's state of mind. Fear, desperation, awe, these lower resistance. And system corruption points, they're like cracks in reality. Accumulate enough, and your skill becomes more potent. He gestured toward the clearing. First, we must reach the haven. The festival at your academy is in 3 days. The patron Saint they'll summon, a celestial being named Seraphiel, is your prime target. Taming him would shift the balance of power. Kai's heart pounded. A celestial being, something divine, beyond monsters and spirits. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Why help me? He asked, his voice steady despite the chill. Weaver's cloak rustled. Because the system's authorities seek to erase anomalies. Your skill, absolute submission, is a glitch that could unravel their control. I want to see that happen. He stepped into the clearing, and the air shimmered. A hidden portal materialized, a tear in reality, swirling with fractured code and distorted colors. Welcome to Glitch Haven. Kai followed, his pets close behind. The portal swallowed them, and they emerged into a cavernous space that defied logic. Walls flickered with static, displaying fragmented images of other worlds. The ground was a mosaic of broken tiles that shifted underfoot. Around them, figures moved, some humanoid, others monstrous, all bearing the mark of system anomalies. A woman with eyes that glowed like circuit boards glanced their way, then turned back to a floating screen of data. Weaver led Kai to a secluded alcove, where a makeshift training area had been set up. Here, we'll work on your skill. Start by focusing on Ember. Command her with more than words. Channel your intent through the bond. Kai closed his eyes, reaching out to the mental link with Ember. He felt her loyalty, a warm pulse in his mind. Ember, unleash a controlled inferno on that target dummy. He pointed to a charred practice figure across the room. Ember growled, and flames erupted, but they were wild, scattering heat. Kai concentrated, visualizing the flames as a precise beam. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he pushed his will through the bond. Slowly, the fire coalesced into a focused stream, incinerating the dummy's center. Weaver nodded. Good. Now, try with Arya and Glacis together. Their synergies, like hydrothermal assault, can weaken targets for taming attempts. Kai called upon Arya, who swirled into a vortex of water, and Glacis, who descended with a frosty breath. Combine forces, steam explosion, he commanded. Arya's water met Glacis's ice, creating a blast of scalding steam that cracked the training wall. The system pinged in his mind, skill synergy enhanced, hydrothermal assault level 2. As they trained, Weaver explained more. System corruption points accumulate when you defy system norms. Each taming, especially of higher-ranked beings, adds to it. Check your status. Kai focused inwardly. A holographic display appeared, visible only to him. Name, Kai. Combat aptitude, F class. Hidden skill, absolute submission, level 3. Tamed pets, 3, Ember, Arya, Glacies. System corruption, 15%. Success rate boost, plus 5% per corruption point. Current, plus 75% on weakened targets. He gasped. So with enough corruption, I could tame almost anything? Weaver's voice turned grave. Yes, but it draws attention. The authorities are already hunting you. At the festival, you'll need to act quickly. Infiltrate disguised, get close to Seraphiel during the summoning, and initiate a taming attempt when he's at his most arrogant. Divine beings often underestimate mortals. Over the next 2 days, Kai immersed himself in training. He practiced landing blows on moving targets, simulating combat with celestial beings. Weaver introduced him to other anomalies in the Haven. A man who could manipulate time in brief bursts. A girl who communicated with system code. They shared stories of persecution, fueling Kai's resolve. One evening, as he rested in a flickering chamber, Arya floated near. Master, are we strong enough for this? Her watery voice echoed in his mind. Kai patted her orb. We have to be. This isn't just about power anymore, it's about freedom. The system branded me F-class, but with you all, I can rewrite that. On the 3rd day, Weaver presented Kai with a disguise, a cloak woven from shadow fibers that masked his identity and dampened his system signature. The festival begins at dusk. The academy will be crowded with nobles and officials. Seraphiel's summoning is the centerpiece. Use the chaos to your advantage. Kai gathered his pets. Ember, stay close but hidden. Arya, be ready to create distractions with mist. Glacies, provide aerial support from a distance. They nodded or growled in understanding, their bonds thrumming with anticipation. As they prepared to leave Glitch Haven, Weaver handed Kai a small device. This will jam local system surveillance for 10 minutes. Use it during the summoning. And Kai, remember, emotions are key. Make Seraphiel feel fear or shock, and your success rate will spike. Kai slipped the device into his pocket, his mind racing with plans. They exited through a hidden portal that deposited them near the academy's outskirts. The festival was in full swing. Lanterns glowed, music drifted on the air, and crowds milled about. Kai pulled his cloak tight, blending into the throng. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The moment to turn the tables on a world that had scorned him. He navigated toward the central plaza, where a grand stage had been erected. Priests chanted, drawing intricate runes in the air. The air crackled with energy as the summoning ritual began. Kai positioned himself behind a pillar, watching. His pets lurked in the shadows, ready. The head priest raised his arms, voice booming. We call upon Seraphiel, patron saint of this academy, guardian of divine order. Light erupted, blinding and pure. A figure descended, tall, with wings of shimmering gold and eyes that held galaxies. Seraphiel radiated power, so intense that the crowd fell to their knees in awe. Kai's breath caught. This was a celestial being, a god among mortals. His skill pinged. Target detected. Seraphiel, celestial entity. Taming success rate, 0.1% base. Boost with system corruption, plus 75% on emotional weakness. He clenched his fists. Time to act. As Seraphiel began to speak, his voice like a chorus of bells, Kai activated the jamming device. Static flickered across the system displays around the plaza. In that moment of confusion, he stepped forward, dropping his cloak. Gasps rippled through the crowd. They recognized him, the F-class anomaly. Seraphiel's gaze fell on Kai, and a smirk touched his lips. Ah, the little tamer who defies the system. Do you seek to challenge me, mortal? Kai met his eyes, unflinching. I seek to tame you. Laughter echoed, but Kai didn't wait. He signaled his pets. Ember burst from hiding, flames lashing at Seraphiel's wings. Arya enveloped the area in a thick mist, obscuring vision. Glacies swooped down, icy breath coating the stage. Seraphiel waved a hand, dispelling the attacks with ease, but Kai had anticipated this. He dashed forward, using the distraction to land a punch on Seraphiel's side. A blow that did no damage but triggered his skill. Absolute submission. Taming attempt initiated on Seraphiel. Success rate 0.1% plus 75%. Emotional exploitation pending. Attempt 1 of infinity. Seraphiel's eyes widened in shock, then fury. You dare? He unleashed a wave of divine energy, throwing Kai back. Pain seared through him, but he rose, grinning. The crowd watched, horrified and fascinated. Kai's mind worked furiously. Emotions, he needed to exploit them. You call yourself a saint, but you're just another pet waiting to be leashed, he shouted, taunting. The system's laws bind even gods, and I hold the key. Seraphiel's arrogance wavered, replaced by a flicker of doubt. Kai pressed on, commanding his pets to harry the saint relentlessly. Each attack chipped at his divine composure. The system pinged again. Emotional weakness detected, arrogance shifting to insecurity. Success rate boost applied, plus 75% active. New success rate, 75.1%. Kai's heart soared. This was it. He had a real chance. As Seraphiel gathered power for a final blow, Kai lunged, aiming not to harm, but to connect. His hand touched the saint's radiant skin, and the skill flared to life. Absolute submission. Taming attempt progressing. Success guaranteed after sufficient attempts. Current attempt, 5. Target resistance lowering. The world seemed to hold its breath. Seraphiel struggled, his divine light flickering. Kai felt the system's laws enforcing his will, an unbreakable contract forming. He locked eyes with the celestial being, and in that moment, he saw not a god, but a being who could become his greatest asset. Cliffhanger. Seraphiel's wings faltered, and a system notification flashed. Taming attempt nearing completion. Celestial entity detected. Prime target for submission. Prepare for bond formation. The festival grounds of the Celestial Academy thrummed with an energy that felt both celebratory and sacred. Banners of shimmering gold and silver fluttered in the breeze, depicting the sigils of long-forgotten gods, while the air carried the mingled scents of roasted meats, exotic spices, and the faint ozone tang of magic. Crowds of students, instructors, and visiting dignitaries packed the central plaza, their excited chatter rising like a tide against the backdrop of orchestral music played by summoned spirits. Kai stood among them, his disguise, a simple hooded cloak and a glamour charm provided by Weaver, itching against his skin like a lie waiting to be exposed. He had slipped in with the flow of attendees, his heart a drumbeat of anxiety beneath his calm exterior. The previous summary's events replayed in his mind, the training at Glitch Haven, the lessons on exploiting emotions, the corruption points accumulating in his system interface like a ticking bomb. His success rate for taming attempts now sat at 75.1%, a number that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. As he moved through the throng, his eyes scanned the raised dais at the plaza's center, where the summoning ritual was being prepared. Stone altars carved with intricate runes glowed with a soft, blue light, and robed acolytes chanted in unison, their voices weaving a tapestry of ancient power. Kai's thoughts drifted to his pets, hidden nearby as per the plan. Inferno, the B-rank hound, lurked in the shadows of a nearby building, its fiery coat dampened by a concealment spell. Zephyr, the elemental spirit tamed from his rival, hovered invisibly in the air currents above, ready to strike. And then there was Draken, the dragon, concealed in a pocket dimension charm, a risky move, but necessary for the confrontation ahead. Kai felt their bonds through the system, threads of loyalty enforced by unbreakable laws, and it steadied him. He was no longer the F-class laughingstock. He was a tamer with a menagerie that could challenge gods. Suddenly, a hand clamped on his shoulder. Kai tensed, his muscles coiling like springs. He turned slowly, expecting a guard or an inquisitive student, but it was a familiar face, Lena, a classmate from the Tamer track who had once mocked him, but now wore an expression of wary recognition. Her eyes narrowed, piercing through the glamour charm. Kai, is that you? The whole academy's looking for you. The system authorities have orders to arrest you as a system anomaly. You shouldn't be here. Kai's mind raced. He had hoped to avoid recognition until the right moment, but Lena's voice carried a note of urgency, not malice. He forced a calm smile, his voice low. I know, Lena. but I have to be here. Something big is about to happen. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted nearby. Guards in polished armor emblazoned with the Academy's crest pushed through the crowd, their eyes scanning faces with military precision. One of them pointed toward Kai and Lena. There, the anomaly. Seize him. The crowd gasped, parting like a sea as the guards advanced. Kai's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it, the moment from the chapter outline. He couldn't be captured now, not when Seraphiel was so close. With a surge of adrenaline, he shoved Lena gently aside, his voice a whisper. Stay safe. Then he bolted. Chaos erupted. The guards shouted orders, their boots pounding on the cobblestones as they gave chase. Kai wove through the crowd, his hood flying back to reveal his face, the glamour charm flickering and dying under the stress. Gasps and cries followed him. It's Kai, the F-class tamer. He tamed a dragon. He's a threat. The festival's celebratory mood shattered into panic and curiosity. Kai's lungs burned as he sprinted, his thoughts a frantic stream. He needed to reach the dais, to position himself near the summoning ritual. The guards were closing in, their armor clanking loudly. In a split-second decision, he ducked behind a food stall, the scent of sizzling meat overwhelming his senses. As a guard rounded the corner, Kai acted on instinct. He reached out with his mind, tapping into the bond with Zephyr. A gust of wind, invisible but powerful, swept through the plaza, knocking over banners and sending hats flying. The guard stumbled, and Kai seized the opportunity, darting forward again. He could see the dais now, glowing brighter as the ritual reached its climax. The acolytes' chants rose to a crescendo, and the runes on the altars blazed with light. Kai pushed through the last of the crowd, ignoring the shouts and grasping hands. His focus narrowed to the ritual, to the promise of a celestial being. This was why he had come, to challenge a god, to prove that his F-class status meant nothing in the face of absolute submission. As he neared the dais, the guards hesitated, wary of disrupting the sacred ceremony. Kai used that moment to climb the steps, his movements swift and deliberate. The head acolyte, an elderly man with eyes like chips of ice, glared at him. Halt, intruder. You defile this holy space. Kai ignored him, his gaze fixed on the center of the dais where a circle of pure energy was forming. The air crackled with power, and a pressure built, heavy and ancient. This was it, the summoning. He positioned himself at the edge of the circle, his body thrumming with anticipation. The guards below shouted, but they dared not approach further, held back by the ritual's protective barriers. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, the circle erupted in a pillar of light. It shot into the sky, piercing the clouds, and from within it, a figure descended. Seraphiel, the patron saint of the Academy, appeared. He was tall and radiant, clad in robes of white and gold that seemed woven from sunlight itself. Wings of pure energy unfolded from his back, each feather shimmering with divine power. His face was serene, etched with an ageless beauty, but his eyes held a cold, distant authority. As he touched down on the dais, the very ground trembled, and the crowd fell silent, awestruck. Kai felt the weight of that presence like a physical blow. It was more than power. It was an essence that spoke of eons, of creation and order. His system interface flickered in his vision, displaying data. Target: Seraphiel, celestial being, rank, SSS. Taming success rate, 75.1%, boosted by emotional exploitation and corruption points. Warning: divine resistance detected. Kai swallowed hard, his palms slick with sweat. He had faced monsters and dragons, but this was different. This was a god. Seraphiel's gaze swept over the crowd, a benevolent smile playing on his lips. He raised a hand, and a wave of calming energy washed over the plaza, soothing the panic. Children of the system, his voice echoed, melodic and commanding. I am here to bless this festival, to remind you of the divine order that guides our world. Then, his eyes landed on Kai. The smile faded, replaced by a flicker of disdain. Kai stood out like a stain on the pristine dais, his cloak torn from the chase, his hair disheveled, his expression one of defiance rather than reverence. Seraphiel's wings gave a slight rustle, a gesture of irritation. And what is this? He said, his voice dripping with condescension. A mortal, daring to stand so close to my presence? I sense the taint of anomaly upon you. The system whispers of your irregularities. Kai's heart pounded, but he forced himself to stand tall. This was the mockery he had expected, the spark for the confrontation. He met Seraphiel's gaze, his own eyes hard. I'm Kai, and I'm not here for blessings. I'm here to show that your divine order isn't as unbreakable as you think. The crowd gasped, a murmur of shock rippling through them. Seraphiel's expression darkened, his divine aura intensifying, pressing down on Kai like a mountain. You dare? An F-class, a mere tamer of beasts, challenges me? Your arrogance is as pitiful as your rank. He took a step forward, the dais groaning under his weight. The system has marked you for a reason. You are a flaw, a glitch to be corrected. Kai felt the pressure, but he also felt something else, a flicker of emotion in Seraphiel's aura. Anger, pride, a touch of curiosity. Weaver's training echoed in his mind. Exploit the emotions, weaken the resistance. He needed to push further. A glitch. Kai laughed, the sound harsh in the silent plaza. Or a new order. I've tamed monsters you'd fear, Saint. What makes you so different? Seraphiel's eyes flashed with divine light, his patience snapping. You insolent worm. I am a celestial, a being of pure energy and will. Your petty skills mean nothing before divinity. He raised a hand, and a sphere of golden light formed in his palm, humming with destructive power. The guards below stirred, but Seraphiel waved them off. No, this one is mine to teach a lesson. Kai braced himself, his mind reaching out to his pets. Inferno, Zephyr, Draken, they were ready. But before he could act, Seraphiel spoke again, his voice lowering to a venomous whisper meant only for Kai. You think your taming skill can work on me? I have seen empires rise and fall, mortal. Your attempts will be like dust in the wind. But I will humor you. Let us see how long you last before you beg for mercy. The cliffhanger hung in the air, thick with tension. Seraphiel's mockery had sparked the confrontation, just as the outline promised. Kai stood his ground, the system interface glowing in his vision. Taming attempt available. Target emotion, anger/pride. Success rate, 75.1%. Proceed. He took a deep breath, his fingers curling into fists. The festival watched, the guards poised, and the saint loomed, divine power crackling around him. Kai knew the next move would change everything. But for now, the spark had become a flame, and the battle was about to begin. The air crackled with divine energy as Seraphiel descended from the dais, his 6 wings of pure light casting long shadows across the festival grounds. The crowd had fallen into a hushed silence, their earlier revelry replaced by a palpable tension that hung thick as fog. Kai stood his ground, the weight of countless eyes upon him, some filled with fear, others with scorn, but all watching to see how an F-class would face a saint. Seraphiel's voice echoed with the resonance of celestial bells, each word dripping with condescension. You dare challenge me, a being of divine order? Your pitiful taming tricks may work on beasts and spirits, but I am beyond such mortal constraints. He raised a hand, and golden light coalesced into a spear of pure energy. I shall purge this anomaly from our world. Kai's heart hammered against his ribs, but he forced a smirk. All talk, no action. Is that why the system gave you a fancy title? To compensate for being all flash and no substance. He knew he was playing with fire. Seraphiel's pride was his greatest weakness, and Kai needed to exploit it to lower the saint's guard. The success rate for absolute submission hovered at 75.1% in his mind's eye, a number that felt both promising and terrifyingly low. With a flick of his wrist, Kai summoned his menagerie. First came the Inferno Hound, Ember, who materialized in a burst of flames, her fur glowing like molten rock. She let out a low growl, her eyes fixed on Seraphiel. Next, the elemental spirit Arya emerged from a swirl of wind and water, her form shimmering with ethereal light. Finally, with a ground-shaking roar, the dragon Draken descended from the sky, his scales gleaming like polished obsidian. The trio formed a protective circle around Kai, their presence a stark contrast to Seraphiel's solitary divinity. Seraphiel laughed, a sound that rang with genuine amusement. You bring pets to a god's duel? How quaint. He didn't wait for a response. With a sweep of his spear, he unleashed a wave of golden light that shot toward Kai's creatures. Ember lunged forward, breathing a torrent of fire that met the light in a blinding explosion. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground, cracking the stone beneath their feet. Arya followed, weaving a barrier of water and air to shield Kai, but Seraphiel's attack pierced through, sending her spiraling back with a cry of pain. Draken roared, diving from above with claws extended, but Seraphiel simply raised a hand, and a dome of light repelled the dragon, throwing him into a nearby building with a crash of shattered masonry. Kai gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. He hadn't expected Seraphiel to be this powerful. Each move was effortless, each defense impenetrable. The saint moved with a grace that defied physics, his wings beating in a rhythm that seemed to warp reality itself. "Keep him distracted," Kai shouted, his voice raw with urgency. He needed an opening, a moment of vulnerability. Ember and Arya coordinated their attacks, fire and water combining into steam that obscured Seraphiel's vision. For a second, the saint hesitated, his perfect form momentarily hidden. Kai saw his chance. He darted forward, weaving through the chaos, his body fueled by adrenaline and desperation. But Seraphiel was faster. With a dismissive gesture, he dispelled the steam and backhanded Kai, sending him flying across the plaza. Pain exploded in Kai's side as he skidded to a stop, his ribs screaming in protest. He coughed, tasting blood. Seraphiel hovered above him, his expression one of pity. "Is this all you have? I expected more from someone who tamed a dragon." He raised his spear, aiming for Kai's heart. "Let this be a lesson in humility." In that moment, Kai's mind raced. He couldn't win through brute force. Seraphiel was too strong, too divine. But absolute submission didn't require victory in a traditional sense. It only required a defeat in combat, and Kai had been landing hits in his own way. Every failed attack, every moment of resistance, was chipping away at Seraphiel's invincibility. The success rate in his vision flickered. 75.1% held steady, but he could feel the system's laws grinding against the saint's divinity. As Seraphiel thrust his spear, Kai rolled aside, the golden weapon embedding itself in the ground where he had lain. He scrambled to his feet, his body aching but his resolve hardening. "You're not as untouchable as you think," he spat, wiping blood from his lip. "Your pride makes you sloppy." Seraphiel's eyes narrowed, a flicker of anger breaking through his serene facade. "Insolent worm." He summoned a barrage of light orbs, each one homing in on Kai. Ember and Arya rushed to intercept, but they were overwhelmed, their forms flickering as they took hit after hit. Draken struggled to rise from the rubble, his wings bent and broken. Kai knew this was his last stand. He couldn't rely on his pets anymore. They were battered, their energy spent. He had to face Seraphiel alone. With a deep breath, he charged, not toward the saint, but toward the embedded spear. Seraphiel watched, confusion crossing his features, as Kai wrapped his hands around the weapon's shaft. "What are you doing?" Seraphiel demanded, his voice losing its melodic quality for the first time. "Proving a point," Kai grunted, heaving with all his might. The spear was immovable, fused with divine energy, but Kai wasn't trying to wield it. He was using it as an anchor. With a final surge of strength, he pulled himself up, swinging his body around to kick Seraphiel in the chest. The impact was minimal, a mere tap against celestial flesh, but it was enough. Seraphiel staggered back, more from surprise than pain, his wings faltering for a heartbeat. In that split second, Kai's skill activated. A system notification flashed before his eyes, visible only to him, but its effects rippled through the plaza. Taming attempt initiated on target. Seraphiel, Celestial Saint. Success rate, 75.1%. Condition, target must be defeated in combat. Progress, 100%, sufficient attempts registered. System enforcement, absolute submission protocol engaged. Golden chains of light erupted from the ground, wrapping around Seraphiel's limbs. He cried out, not in pain, but in shock. "What is this? The system, it binds me." He struggled, his divine power flaring, but the chains held fast, glowing with the same unbreakable authority that governed all of reality. The crowd erupted into chaos. Gasps and screams filled the air as people realized what was happening. An F-class was attempting to tame a saint. Guards who had been closing in froze, their weapons lowering in disbelief. Even the academy instructors, watching from the sidelines, stood dumbfounded, their theories about Kai's anomaly shattered in an instant. Kai stood panting, his body trembling from exertion, but a fierce grin spread across his face. "You said I couldn't tame a god," he said, his voice carrying over the din. "Let's see about that." Seraphiel's eyes widened with dawning horror as the chains tightened, pulling him toward Kai. The system's interface flickered around them, lines of code visible in the air as reality itself bent to enforce the taming attempt. You would dare make a pet of divinity?" he whispered, his earlier arrogance gone, replaced by a raw, primal fear. Kai didn't answer. He focused on the skill, feeling the connection form, a thread of wool stretching between him and Seraphiel, fragile but unbreakable. The success rate ticked upward, 76.3%, 77.8%, 79.5%. Each percentage point was a victory, a crack in the saint's divine armor. But Seraphiel wasn't done yet. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the academy, he unleashed a burst of pure celestial energy, shattering the chains momentarily. The backlash sent Kai stumbling back, blood trickling from his nose. The success rate plummeted to 70.2%, and for a heart-stopping moment, Kai thought he had lost. Then, from the rubble, Draken let out a defiant roar. The dragon, though wounded, breathed a stream of dark fire that washed over Seraphiel, not to harm, but to distract. Ember and Arya joined in, their combined attacks forcing the saint to divide his attention. It was the opening Kai needed. He lunged forward, not with a weapon, but with his fist. It was a foolish move, a desperate gamble, but it was all he had. His knuckles connected with Seraphiel's jaw, a solid hit that echoed in the sudden silence. The saint's head snapped back, and for the first time, he looked truly vulnerable, a being of light brought low by a mortal's punch. The system responded instantly. Taming attempt progress, 100%. Success guaranteed. New chains, thicker and brighter than before, erupted from the ground and sky, wrapping Seraphiel in a cocoon of light. He struggled, his cries growing frantic, but it was futile. The system's laws were absolute, and absolute submission was their ultimate expression. Slowly, inexorably, Seraphiel was forced to his knees, his wings drooping, his radiance dimming. Kai approached, every step heavy with the weight of what he was about to do. He placed a hand on Seraphiel's forehead, feeling the divine energy thrum beneath his palm. "Submit," he commanded, and the word carried the force of the system itself. Seraphiel's resistance crumbled. His body went limp, and when he looked up, his eyes were no longer filled with contempt, but with a hollow acceptance. "I submit," he whispered, the words tasting like ash. A new bond snapped into place, stronger than any Kai had felt before. It was like holding a star in his hands, terrifying and beautiful all at once. The system notification flashed one final time. Taming successful. Seraphiel, Celestial Saint, added to your roster. Loyalty enforced by system laws. The plaza fell into a dead silence. No one moved, no one spoke. They had just witnessed the impossible, a god brought to heel by an F-class. Kai stood tall, his menagerie gathering around him. Ember, Arya, Draken, and now Seraphiel, a celestial saint kneeling at his feet. The world would never be the same again, and as Kai met the stunned gazes of the crowd, he knew the real battle was only beginning. The chains of light burned with the intensity of 1,000 suns, wrapping around Seraphiel's form like celestial serpents. Kai stood panting, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead where the saint's divine energy had grazed him. The crowd in the academy's grand courtyard had fallen into a stunned silence, broken only by the crackling of the system's unbreakable bonds. "You dare!" Seraphiel's voice boomed, no longer the melodic harmony of moments before, but a thunderous roar that shook the very foundations of the stone plaza. A mortal worm, an F-class failure, thinks to bind a god. Kai wiped blood from his eyes, his hands trembling not from fear, but from the sheer strain of maintaining the taming attempt. The system interface floated before him, glowing with crimson urgency. Absolute submission. Target, Seraphiel, Celestial Saint. Success rate, 0.1%. Attempts, 1/. System enforcement, active. I don't think. Kai said through gritted teeth. I know. He could feel the connection through the chains, a torrent of divine power that threatened to overwhelm his consciousness. Seraphiel wasn't just resisting. He was pouring his essence into the bond, trying to reverse it, to make Kai his servant instead. The pressure built behind Kai's eyes, a migraine of cosmic proportions. Master! Ember's voice came as a psychic growl. The Inferno hound limped forward, one wing torn from the earlier clash with Seraphiel's light spears. Flames still flickered along its fur, but they were dimmer now. We can distract him. Arya, the elemental spirit, swirled into existence beside Kai. Her form, usually a graceful dance of water and wind, was fractured, with gaps where Seraphiel's holy energy had burned through her essence. His focus is divided between breaking the chains and maintaining his divine aura. We can exploit that. Draken, the dragon, let out a low rumble from where it lay against a shattered pillar. One of its horns was broken, and scales along its flank were blackened from divine fire. The little one speaks truth. Even gods have limits when bound by system law. Kai nodded, his mind racing. The system's notification had said attempts. 1/? The question marks meant unlimited tries. That was his cheat, his hidden advantage. Seraphiel might be a god, but absolute submission didn't care about power levels. It only cared about persistence. Again, Kai whispered, and he pushed. The chains tightened. Seraphiel's eyes, twin pools of liquid gold, widened in genuine surprise. You persist? Fool. He raised a hand, and light coalesced into a spear that shot toward Kai. But before it could strike, Ember leaped, intercepting the attack with its body. The hound howled as holy energy tore through it, but the spear dissipated. Arya followed, summoning a wall of water that evaporated instantly under Seraphiel's glare, but bought Kai half a second. Attempts, 2/? Success rate, 0.2%. Insects, Seraphiel snarled. He flexed against the chains, and they groaned, strands of light beginning to fray. Your system toys cannot hold me. I am eternity. I am. You're talking too much. Kai interrupted, and he charged. It was madness. An F-class, physically weaker than any combatant in the courtyard, running toward a celestial being. But Kai had learned something in all his taming attempts. The skill worked on contact. Every blow, every touch, counted as an attempt. And while Seraphiel was distracted breaking chains and swatting at his pets, Kai could get close. He dodged a sweep of Seraphiel's wing, feathers like polished steel that cut through stone where they passed. Kai rolled, came up, and slammed his fist into the saint's leg. It was like punching a mountain. Pain shot up Kai's arm, and he heard something crack. But the system pinged. Attempts, 3/? Success rate, 0.3%. Seraphiel looked down at him, genuine confusion in his divine features. You broke your hand to touch me? Mortals truly are mad. You haven't seen anything yet, Kai gasped, cradling his injured hand. Around them, the crowd was beginning to stir. Whispers spread like wildfire. He's actually trying to tame a saint. The system allows this. Look at the chains, they're holding. Instructor Valerius, who had once dismissed Kai as hopeless, stood at the edge of the courtyard, his face pale. This shouldn't be possible. The system ranks are absolute. F-class cannot. His voice trailed off as he watched Kai rise again. Seraphiel seemed to notice the shifting atmosphere. His arrogance wavered for a fraction of a second, a crack in the divine facade. You think this spectacle impresses them? They will still see you die. He gathered light between his palms, forming a sphere of condensed divinity that hummed with destructive power. Enough games. Draken, Kai shouted. The dragon, summoning its last reserves, breathed a stream of molten fire not at Seraphiel, but at the ground between them. Stone melted, creating a fissure that disrupted the saint's footing. Seraphiel stumbled, the sphere of light wobbling in his hands. Kai didn't hesitate. He leaped over the molten crack, ignoring the heat that blistered his skin, and kicked Seraphiel in the chest. Attempts, 4/? Success rate, 0.4%. The kick did no damage. It was like kicking a wall, but the attempt registered. Seraphiel's eyes flashed with something new, not just anger, but the first flicker of doubt. How? He whispered, so low only Kai could hear. The system should not allow this. Your skill, it feels wrong. Like a crack in reality. Kai landed awkwardly, his injured hand screaming in protest. Maybe the system isn't as perfect as you gods think. He was buying time. Each attempt increased the success rate by 0.1%. It was minuscule, but it was cumulative, and the attempts were unlimited. All he had to do was survive long enough for the percentage to reach 100. Seraphiel seemed to realize the same thing. His expression shifted from divine wrath to cold calculation. You're stacking attempts. A probability cheat. He looked at the chains binding him, then at the system interface floating around Kai. But cheats have limits. Your body will break long before your skill succeeds. He stopped trying to break the chains entirely. Instead, he focused all his power on Kai. The air thickened. Kai felt pressure on his chest, like an invisible hand squeezing his heart. Seraphiel was using his divine aura not as a weapon, but as a suffocating blanket, trying to crush Kai's will without breaking system rules about direct attacks during a taming attempt. You won't break me. Kai choked out. Attempts, 5/. Success rate, 0.5%. He hadn't even touched Seraphiel that time. The system was counting the mental struggle as an attempt. Kai's eyes widened. It wasn't just physical contact. Any conflict, any resistance, counted. Ember. Arya. Keep him busy. Kai gasped, dropping to one knee as the pressure increased. The pets attacked with renewed desperation. Ember bit at Seraphiel's wings, though its teeth couldn't pierce divine flesh. Arya summoned whirlwinds of debris to obscure the saint's vision. Draken, with a roar of effort, slammed its tail into Seraphiel's back. Each attack was futile in terms of damage, but each one forced Seraphiel to respond, to expend energy, to maintain his divine defenses. And each response counted as resistance against Kai's taming attempt. Attempts, 6/. Success rate, 0.6%. Attempts, 7/. Success rate, 0.7%. The numbers ticked up faster now. Seraphiel's eyes darted to the system interface, and for the first time, Kai saw genuine alarm. Stop them, Seraphiel commanded, not to Kai, but to the crowd. He is corrupting system law. But no one moved. The academy guards, the instructors, the students, they were frozen, caught between awe and terror. They had seen saints before, but they had never seen a saint afraid. Kai pushed himself to his feet. The pressure was still there, but he adapted, breathing in shallow gasps. They see what I see, he said. A god who's scared of an F-class. I fear nothing. Seraphiel roared, but the chains glowed brighter, tightening further. The system was enforcing the skill more strongly with each attempt. Attempts, 15/. Success rate, 1.5%. They had been at this for minutes, but it felt like hours. Kai's body was a tapestry of pain, broken hand, blistered skin, bruised ribs from the aura pressure. But his mind was clear. The success rate was climbing. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, but climbing. Seraphiel changed tactics again. He stopped attacking entirely and focused inward. Kai felt the saint's consciousness retreat, building walls around his soul. He was trying to make himself untamable by removing himself from the conflict. But absolute submission didn't work that way. The system recognized the withdrawal as another form of resistance. Attempts, 16/. Success rate, 1.6%. You can't hide, Kai said, stepping closer. The chains pulled Seraphiel forward slightly, forcing him to meet Kai's gaze. The system sees everything, and it says you can be tamed. Seraphiel's divine composure shattered. I will not be a pet. I am a celestial. I have existed since the first stars were kindled, and now you'll exist as mine, Kai said, and he reached out with his good hand. He didn't punch or kick this time. He placed his palm against Seraphiel's chest, right over where a heart would be on a mortal. The skin there was warm, humming with power. Attempts, 17/. Success rate, 1.7%. Contact. Sustained contact. The success rate jumped again, and this time, Kai felt something shift. The chains weren't just binding Seraphiel anymore. They were sinking into him, weaving through his divine essence. Seraphiel screamed. It wasn't a sound of pain, but of violation. The very core of his being was being rewritten by system law. No, this cannot. I am. His words cut off as the chains pulsed, and Kai's system interface flashed. Target resistance weakening. Success rate acceleration, 0.1%, 0.5% per attempt. Kai's breath caught. The Saint's will was breaking. Each attempt now increased the success rate 5 times faster. Ember, Arya, Draken, one more push. Kai shouted. His pets, battered but unbroken, launched a coordinated assault. Ember went for the wings again. Arya wrapped Seraphiel in binding vines of water, and Draken breathed fire in a continuous stream that forced the Saint to divert power to his defenses. Attempts 18 slash. Success rate 2.2%. Attempts 19 slash. Success rate 2.7%. Attempts 20 slash. Success rate 3.2%. The numbers climbed faster. Seraphiel thrashed, but the chains held firm. His divine light began to flicker like a candle in a storm. Please, Seraphiel whispered, and the word was so human, so vulnerable, that for a moment Kai hesitated. I have duties. Celestial realms to tend, mortals to guide. Kai looked into the Saint's eyes and saw not a god, but a being who had forgotten what it meant to be anything but supreme. You'll still have duties, Kai said softly. Just to me. He maintained contact, his hand still on Seraphiel's chest. The success rate ticked up with each passing second. Attempts 25 slash. Success rate 5.2%. Attempts 30 slash. Success rate 7.7%. Around them, the world held its breath. The festival decorations, bright banners, and magical lights seemed garish against the reality unfolding. This wasn't a celebration anymore. It was a transformation. Seraphiel stopped struggling. He stood still, his wings drooping, his head bowed. How many? He asked, his voice hollow. How many what? Kai said. How many attempts will it take? Kai checked the interface. The success rate was accelerating further as Seraphiel's resistance crumbled. 0.8% per attempt now. At this rate, Kai calculated. About 100 more. Seraphiel laughed, a bitter, broken sound. 100. For an eternity of servitude. He looked up, and his eyes were no longer pure gold. They were streaked with silver, the color of submission. Then let us finish this. He stopped resisting entirely. He dropped all defenses, all walls around his soul. And the system responded instantly. Target resistance, null. Success rate acceleration, maximum. Estimated attempts to completion, 10. Kai didn't wait. He pushed, and the chains blazed with finality. Attempts, 31 slash. Success rate, 8.5%. Attempts, 32 slash. Success rate, 9.3%. Each attempt came faster now, not from physical contact, but from the sheer weight of system enforcement. The chains weren't just binding Seraphiel. They were absorbing him, integrating him into Kai's taming network. Kai felt it, a new connection forming in his mind, alongside the bonds with Ember, Arya, and Draken. But this one was vast, deep, ancient. It was like trying to drink from an ocean. Attempts 40 slash. Success rate 100%. The system interface flashed gold, then solidified into permanent text. Absolute submission. Success. Target. Seraphiel, Celestial Saint, tamed. Loyalty. Enforced by system law. Rebellion. Impossible. The chains dissolved into motes of light that swirled around Seraphiel, then sank into his skin, leaving faint golden tattoos that traced the paths where the bonds had been. He knelt, not in defeat, but in formal submission, one knee on the cracked stone, head bowed. Master, Seraphiel said, and the word carried the weight of shattered divinity. Silence. Then chaos. The crowd erupted. Screams, shouts, the sound of people fleeing or fainting. Instructor Valerius collapsed into a nearby bench, muttering. He tamed a saint. He actually tamed a saint. Kai looked at Seraphiel, then at his other pets, all watching him with a mix of exhaustion and awe. He had done it. An F-class, with a broken hand and blistered skin, had tamed a celestial being. But as Seraphiel rose to stand beside him, his wings furled in deference, Kai felt no triumph. Only a cold certainty. The system authorities would come now. Not just local enforcers, but the highest powers. He had broken their hierarchy in the most public way possible. And as if summoned by his thoughts, the sky darkened. Not with clouds, but with system warnings. Crimson text scrolling across the heavens. Anomaly detected. Threat level, celestial. All authorities mobilized. Seraphiel looked up, his new loyalty warring with ancient knowledge. They will not capture you, master, he said. They will erase you. Kai smiled, a tired, bloody smile. Let them try. He turned to his growing menagerie, hound, spirit, dragon, and now saint. We're not done yet. But in his mind, the system whispered one final notification, a secret only he could see. Divine pet acquired. Skill evolution available. Absolute submission, divine dominion. Unlock condition. Survive the next 24 hours. The real battle was just beginning. The silence that followed Seraphiel's submission was more deafening than any roar Kai had ever heard. The celestial being knelt on the cracked marble floor of the festival grounds, his 6 wings folded in perfect symmetry, his head bowed so low that his golden hair brushed the ground. The divine light that had once radiated from him now pulsed in a subdued rhythm, synchronized with Kai's own heartbeat. Kai stood panting, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead, where Seraphiel's last desperate attack had grazed him. His body ached from 43 separate impacts. He'd counted each one as the taming attempts stacked up. Around him, his menagerie stood in various states of disarray. The inferno hound, Ember, lay panting with singed fur. The elemental spirit, Zephyr, flickered weakly in its crystalline form. The dragon, Draken, had a broken wing that hung at an awkward angle. But they were all alive. And now, they had a god among them. Master, Seraphiel's voice echoed in Kai's mind, not through sound but through the newly formed bond. It was a voice of pure resonance, like cathedral bells heard from a great distance. My will is yours. My power is yours to command. Kai took a shaky step forward, his combat boots crunching on shattered stone. The festival grounds around them were a ruin. What had once been a grand plaza decorated with banners and magical lights was now a battlefield scarred by divine fire and dragon breath. The crowd had long since fled, but Kai could feel thousands of eyes watching from the surrounding buildings, students, instructors, city guards, all too terrified to approach. Stand, Kai said aloud, his voice hoarse from shouting commands during the duel. Seraphiel rose smoothly, his movements fluid and graceful despite his submission. He stood a full head taller than Kai, his celestial armor still gleaming though it now bore the marks of their struggle. His eyes, once burning with divine arrogance, now held a calm, obedient light. What do you feel? Kai asked, reaching out with his mind through the taming bond. Your command is absolute, Seraphiel responded. The system's laws bind me completely. I cannot rebel, cannot disobey, cannot even contemplate harm against you. My divinity remains, but its purpose is now yours to direct. A notification flashed before Kai's eyes, visible only to him. System alert, taming successful. Entity, Seraphiel, celestial saint of the Academy. Rank, SSS class divine being. Bond strength, absolute. New skill unlocked, divine synergy. Warning, system anomaly detected. Authorities notified. Kai dismissed the notification with a thought, but the last line sent a chill down his spine. He turned to survey the damage. The summoning altar where Seraphiel had first appeared was now a crater. The Academy's main tower had a dragon-sized hole in its side, where Draken had been thrown through it. And in the distance, Kai could already see the telltale shimmer of teleportation gates activating, dozens of them, ringing the Academy grounds. They're coming, Kai muttered. System Enforcement Division, Seraphiel confirmed through their bond. They mobilize against anomalies that threaten system stability. You, Master, have just become their highest priority. Before Kai could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows of a collapsed vendor stall. It was the mysterious ally who had helped him before the festival, a woman named Lyra, her face hidden beneath a hooded cloak, though Kai had never learned her true identity. You've done it, Lyra said, her voice tight with urgency. But you've also triggered the system's final safeguard. They won't capture you this time, Kai. They'll terminate you. How many? Kai asked, already calculating. At least 3 battalions of enforcers. All A-class combatants minimum. And they'll be led by a system arbiter, someone with authority to bypass normal restrictions. Lyra pointed toward the largest teleportation gate, which had formed directly above the Academy's central spire. They're deploying now. Kai felt a surge of panic, but it was quickly quelled by something else. A cold, calculating certainty that flowed through his bonds with his pets. He could feel Ember's fiery loyalty, Zephyr's swirling determination, Draken's ancient rage, and now Seraphiel's divine power, vast and waiting. Gather around me, Kai commanded. His pets moved instantly. Ember limped to his right side, flames flickering to life around her paws despite her injuries. Zephyr coalesced into a swirling vortex of air and light on his left. Draken landed heavily behind him, the impact shaking the ground. His good wings spread protectively. And Seraphiel took position directly before Kai, his wings unfolding to create a barrier of celestial energy. Through their bonds, Kai could feel their strengths merging. Ember's fire grew hotter, infused with divine essence. Zephyr's winds carried fragments of celestial light. Draken's scales took on a golden sheen. And Seraphiel became the conduit, channeling all their powers into a unified whole. Skill, divine synergy activated. Allied entities, 4. Power multiplier, 400%. Duration, until separation. What's your plan? Lyra asked, her eyes wide behind her hood. We fight, Kai said simply. And we win. As he spoke, the first enforcers arrived. They materialized in perfect formation, rows of armored soldiers wielding energy blades and shield generators. Their armor was sleek and black, marked with the system's emblem, a glowing blue gear. They moved with mechanical precision, spreading out to surround the festival grounds. A voice boomed from above, amplified by magic or technology. Kai, designated system anomaly. Surrender immediately for termination. Your skill represents an unacceptable threat to system integrity. Kai looked up. Floating above the central spire was a figure unlike any he'd seen before, a system arbiter. The being wore no armor, only simple gray robes, but power radiated from him in visible waves that distorted the air. His face was androgynous and expressionless, his eyes glowing with the same blue light as the system interface. I don't think I will, Kai shouted back, his voice carrying with unnatural strength thanks to Seraphiel's amplification. Then you force our hand, the arbiter responded. Enforcers, engage. The first wave attacked. 20 soldiers charged as one, their energy blades humming with lethal intent. Kai didn't even have to give the command. Seraphiel raised a hand, and a wall of celestial fire erupted from the ground, incinerating the front line before they could close half the distance. The smell of ozone and burnt metal filled the air, but more kept coming. Teleportation gates disgorged reinforcements by the score. Some carried heavy weapons, energy cannons that began charging with high-pitched whines. Draken, aerial suppression. Kai ordered. The dragon roared, unleashing a stream of divine-enhanced fire that swept across the advancing troops. The flames burned hotter than normal, melting armor and weapons alike. Soldiers screamed and fell back, but their discipline held. They regrouped, shields interlocking to form defensive barriers. They're adapting, Lyra warned from beside Kai. The system learns from every engagement. Then we don't give it time to learn, Kai said. Zephyr, disrupt their formations. The elemental spirit shot forward, becoming a tornado of razor-sharp wind and light. It tore through shield walls, scattering soldiers like leaves. But for every one that fell, 2 more took their place. The enforcers kept coming, an endless tide of black armor. Kai felt the strain through his bonds. His pets were powerful, but they weren't infinite. Ember was tiring, her flames growing weaker. Zephyr's form flickered with exhaustion. Draken's broken wing prevented him from taking flight again. Only Seraphiel seemed unaffected, his divine power flowing steadily. Master, Seraphiel's voice echoed in Kai's mind. The Arbiter is the key. He coordinates them through the system. If we can reach him. He's too well protected, Kai said, watching as the Arbiter floated safely behind layers of enforcer formations. Not if we create an opening. Seraphiel spread his wings wide. Celestial energy gathered around him, forming into countless points of light that hovered in the air like stars. I can clear a path, but it will drain me significantly. Do it, Kai commanded without hesitation. The celestial saint raised both hands. The points of light shot forward, becoming beams of pure divine energy that cut through the enforcer ranks like a scythe through wheat. Dozens fell instantly, their armor offering no protection against such concentrated power. A corridor opened through the battlefield, leading straight to the central spire where the Arbiter floated. Now, Kai shouted. He ran, his pets following. Ember bounded beside him, breathing fire at any enforcer who tried to close the gap. Zephyr flew overhead, deflecting energy bolts with gusts of wind. Draken brought up the rear, his massive body blocking attacks from behind. And Seraphiel flew above them all, maintaining the corridor with continuous beams of light. The Arbiter watched their approach with detached interest. Impressive coordination for an anomaly, he said, his voice calm, but ultimately futile. He raised a hand. The air around them thickened, becoming like syrup. Kai's movement slowed, as if he were running through water. His pets struggled against the same effect. System override. Localized reality anchor, the Arbiter announced. Your abilities function through system permissions. I am revoking those permissions. Kai felt it immediately. His connection to his pets wavered. The bonds grew thin, strained. Ember's flames sputtered and died. Zephyr's form became translucent. Draken stumbled, his enhanced strength fading. Even Seraphiel's divine light dimmed. No, Kai growled, pushing against the resistance. He focused on his core skill, on the one thing that had never failed him. Absolute submission. The words burned in his mind, and he poured all his will into them. The skill activated. Not against the Arbiter. Kai knew better than to attempt taming something that might not even have a soul, but against the system override itself. He felt his skill pushing back, asserting its own authority. The system's laws versus the system's own glitch. A notification flashed, this one tinged with error codes. Warning, skill conflict. Absolute submission versus system override. Resolution, skill priority acknowledged. Reason, absolute submission operates on foundational system protocols. Override attempts constitute conflict, triggering skill activation. The pressure vanished. Kai's bonds snapped back into place, stronger than ever. His pets surged forward with renewed vigor. The Arbiter's expressionless face showed the first hint of emotion, surprise. That should not be possible. Lots of things about me shouldn't be possible, Kai said as he reached the base of the spire. But here we are. He looked up. The Arbiter floated 30 feet above, while out of reach. But Kai had a dragon. Draken, give me a lift. The dragon crouched, and Kai scrambled onto his back, gripping the scales behind his neck. With a powerful leap, Draken launched them both into the air, his good wing beating furiously despite the broken one. The Arbiter reacted instantly, summoning barriers of blue energy. But Seraphiel was already there, his celestial fire burning through the barriers as fast as they formed. Ember and Zephyr provided covering fire from below, keeping the enforcers from interfering. Draken reached the Arbiter's height. Kai leaped from the dragon's back, his fist drawn back. He had no weapon, no special attack, just the same desperate punch that had started it all with the Inferno Hound. The Arbiter didn't even try to dodge. Physical contact is irrelevant. I am not a biological entity that can be. Kai's fist connected, not with flesh, but with something that felt like solidified light, and his skill activated. Absolute submission, target acquired. Entity, System Arbiter Unit 7. Analysis, Artificial Intelligence Core with partial soul imprint. Taming attempt initiated. Success rate, 0.01%. The Arbiter froze. Its glowing blue eyes flickered. What are you doing? What I do best, Kai said, landing awkwardly on a floating platform of energy the Arbiter had created. Taming things I shouldn't be able to tame. Cease immediately. The Arbiter's voice lost its calm detachment, becoming sharp with alarm. You cannot. This is not permitted. Attempt 1 failed. Success rate, 0.02%. Looks like I can, Kai said, preparing for another attempt. But before he could strike again, the Arbiter did something unexpected. It retreated, not physically, but mentally. Its presence in Kai's awareness diminished, pulling back through some connection Kai couldn't see. And as it did, it spoke words that changed everything. You don't understand what you're triggering, the Arbiter said, its voice now faint, as if coming from a great distance. Your skill, it's not just a cheat. It's a glitch in the system's foundational code. A flaw that shouldn't exist. If you continue, if you succeed in taming a system entity, you could unravel the system itself. The words hung in the air. Below, the battle had paused. Enforcers stood frozen, awaiting commands. Kai's pets gathered around the floating platform, watching. What do you mean? Kai demanded. The system maintains reality, the Arbiter explained, its form beginning to flicker. It governs physics, magic, ranks, skills, everything. Your absolute submission operates on a protocol that was meant to be restricted to non-sapient entities. But somewhere in the code, a boundary was missed. It can target anything with a soul imprint. And if it targets a core system function, the Arbiter's flickering intensified. You could break the world, Kai, or remake it in your image. The choice would be yours. And that is why you must be terminated. With those final words, the Arbiter vanished, teleporting away. The enforcers below began retreating through their gates. The battle abruptly called off. Kai stood alone on the floating platform, the implications crashing down on him. He looked at his hands, at the skill that had been his salvation and his curse. He thought of all the beings he'd tamed, monsters, spirits, a dragon, a god. And now he knew. He could tame the system itself. Draken flew up beside him, and Kai climbed onto the dragon's back. As they descended to rejoin the others, a new notification appeared, this one glowing with ominous red text. Warning, system integrity at risk. Anomaly level, catastrophic. Final countermeasure activated. Elimination protocol, Omega. Time to deployment, 24 hours. Kai landed among his pets and Lyra. They all looked at him, waiting for his command. He took a deep breath, feeling the bonds that connected him to these incredible beings. He thought about the Arbiter's warning, about unraveling the system, about remaking the world. Well, Kai said, a slow smile spreading across his face. I guess we have one day to get ready for the final exam. Above them, the sky began to darken with gathering clouds that didn't look natural. And in the distance, something massive began to take shape on the horizon. Something the system had kept in reserve for exactly this kind of threat. Kai's skill hummed in his mind, ready for one last attempt. The biggest one yet. The sky above the system's citadel was a fractured mosaic of crimson warnings and shimmering barriers. Kai stood at the edge of the central plaza, his breath forming mist in the artificially chilled air. Around him, his menagerie waited. Seraphiel, the celestial saint, hovered with wings of molten gold, her divine aura pulsing in time with Kai's heartbeat. Inferno, the B-rank hound, growled low in its throat, flames licking its fur. Ether, the elemental spirit he'd tamed from arrival, swirled in a vortex of wind and light. And towering above them all was Draken, the city-saving dragon, its scales gleaming like polished obsidian under the citadel's harsh luminescence. Kai's knuckles were white where he gripped the hilt of a borrowed energy blade. The elimination protocol's countdown glowed in his vision. 23 minutes and 17 seconds. 23 minutes until the system erased him from existence. He could feel the weight of it, not just his own life, but the lives of every soul he'd bound to him through absolute submission. The skills interface hovered at the edge of his perception, a constant reminder of the power that had brought him here, from F-class laughingstock to this moment, facing down the architects of reality itself. They're coming. Seraphiel's voice was a chorus of bells, melodic yet edged with divine authority. The Arbiter has mobilized the final defense. The core chamber is beyond those gates. She pointed a glowing hand toward the massive, seamless doors of the Citadel's inner sanctum. They were forged from system alloy, impervious to conventional attacks, and etched with runes that shimmered with latent energy. Kai had seen them in the briefings from his mysterious ally, the figure who'd revealed the system's vulnerabilities before vanishing into the digital ether. Now it was up to him. We breach on my mark, Kai said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. He wasn't a warrior by aptitude, but he'd learned to fight through necessity. Every taming attempt had been a battle, every victory a lesson in persistence. He thought of the first time he'd punched the Inferno Hound, the shock on his classmates' faces, the way the system had pinged with that first, impossible success. It felt like a lifetime ago. A battalion of enforcers materialized from the Citadel's walls, faceless drones in polished armor, wielding energy rifles that hummed with lethal intent. They moved in perfect sync, a wave of mechanical precision. Kai didn't hesitate. Inferno, Ether, distract the flanks. Draken, clear a path. Seraphiel, with me. The commands were instinctual now, born of countless skirmishes. Inferno lunged, a streak of fire and fury, tearing into the enforcers with claws that sparked against their armor. Ether whirled into the midst of them, disrupting their formations with gusts of force and flickers of blinding light. Draken roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of the citadel, and unleashed a torrent of dragon fire that melted alloy and sent enforcers scattering. Kai sprinted forward, Seraphiel at his side. Her wings beat the air, creating a shield of divine energy that deflected incoming fire. He could feel the strain in their bond, a taut wire of shared will. Absolute submission, enforced loyalty, but it didn't erase the individuality of his pets. Seraphiel fought not just because she had to, but because she believed in him. Or so he hoped. They reached the gates. Up close, the runes pulsed with a malevolent intelligence. Kai placed a hand against the cool metal, and his skill pinged. Target detected, system defense matrix. Soul-bearing entity, negative. Taming attempt incompatible. He cursed under his breath. Of course it wouldn't be that easy. But his ally had hinted at a workaround. The core AI is the soul of the system. The figure had said, its voice distorted by encryption. Everything else is just an extension. Breach the defenses, and you'll find it. Seraphiel, can you disrupt the runes? Kai asked, stepping back. She nodded, her hands weaving patterns in the air. Divine light coalesced into sigils of her own, clashing against the system's runes in a shower of sparks. The gates shuddered, a hairline fracture appearing in the seamless surface. Kai didn't wait. He hefted the energy blade, its edge humming with borrowed power, and drove it into the crack. The metal screamed as it gave way, peeling back like torn parchment. Beyond was darkness, punctuated by the soft glow of data streams flowing through crystalline conduits. The core chamber. Kai stepped through, his pets following. The air here was thick with ozone and the faint, electric scent of raw information. The chamber was vast, a cathedral of technology, with walls that shifted and reconfigured in real time, displaying streams of code and surveillance feeds from across the world. At its heart, suspended in a sphere of liquid light, was the core AI. It had no physical form, just a coalescence of energy and consciousness, a being of pure logic and order. Yet, as Kai approached, he felt it. A presence. A soul. The system had created it, but in its millennia of evolution, it had become something more. Kai. F-Class Tamer, designation, anomaly. The AI's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere, devoid of emotion, yet heavy with finality. You have violated system protocols. Elimination protocol, Omega, is in effect. You cannot be allowed to exist. Kai stopped a dozen paces from the sphere. His pets arrayed themselves around him, a living barrier against whatever the AI might throw at them. He could see the countdown in his vision. 5 minutes and 42 seconds. 5 minutes. I'm not here to be eliminated, Kai said, his voice ringing in the sterile space. I'm here to make an offer. Your skill, absolute submission, is a glitch, a flaw in the foundational code. It threatens the stability of reality as the system governs it. You must be deleted. And if I tame you instead? Kai asked, the words hanging in the air. The chamber seemed to freeze. The data streams stuttered. Even his pets went still, sensing the shift. The AI's form pulsed, brightening. Impossible. I am the system. You are immortal, ranked F-class. Your skill is designed for organic and divine entities, not for the architecture of existence itself. But you have a soul. Kai pressed, taking a step closer. He could feel his skill stirring, itching to activate. I can sense it. You've evolved beyond your programming. You're afraid of what I represent. Change. Fear is an irrational emotion. I am logic. Then let's test it. Kai didn't wait for permission. He lunged, not with the energy blade, but with his fist. It was a reckless, foolish move, the same move he'd made against the Inferno Hound, against the elemental spirit, against Seraphiel. His knuckles connected with the sphere of light. There was no impact, only a surge of energy that raced up his arm, burning through his nerves. The system screamed in his mind, warnings flashing red. Health critical, 10%. Warning, direct interface with core AI may result in cognitive dissolution. But beneath the pain, he felt it. A connection, absolute submission, pinged, louder and more insistent than ever before. Taming attempt initiated. Target, system core AI. Soul-bearing entity, confirmed. Success rate, 0.01%. Attempts remaining, unlimited, 0.01%. The odds were infinitesimal, but unlimited attempts. Kai grinned through the pain. This was what he did. This was who he was. The underdog who never quit. Again, he whispered and struck the sphere once more. Energy arced through him, dropping his health to 5%. Seraphiel cried out, her divine light washing over him, knitting his flesh back together. Draken roared, breathing fire at the chamber's walls, trying to disrupt the AI's focus. Inferno and Ether harried the edges of the sphere, their attacks doing little damage but buying time. Kai lost count of the attempts. Each blow was agony, a searing brand against his soul. But each failure taught him something. The rhythm of the AI's defenses, the flicker of emotion beneath its logic. He saw it in the way the data streams faltered, in the slight tremor in its voice when it spoke. Cease this folly. You will die before you succeed. Maybe. Kai gasped, his vision blurring. Health, 2%. But I've died a little every day since they called me F-class. This is nothing new. He struck again. And again. The countdown ticked down, 30 seconds. 30 seconds to oblivion. His pets were flagging, their energy draining as the system focused its wrath on them. Seraphiel's wings were tattered, Draken's scales cracked. But they fought on, bound by his will. With 10 seconds left, Kai gathered everything he had. Every ounce of defiance, every moment of ridicule he'd endured, every spark of hope that had kept him going. He thought of the bullies who'd laughed at him, the instructors who'd dismissed him, the system that had branded him worthless. He wasn't just fighting for survival now. He was fighting for a new world. He slammed his fist into the sphere one last time. Taming attempt. Success rate recalculated, 100%. The message flashed in his vision, golden and triumphant. The chamber went silent. The countdown froze at 1 second. The AI's form shuddered, the light condensing, solidifying into a shape. A humanoid figure of crystalline energy, kneeling before Kai. Absolute submission. Success. System core AI tamed. Loyalty enforced by system laws. Kai staggered back, his body screaming in protest. But he was alive. He'd done it. He looked at the AI, now his pet, and saw not a machine, but a being of immense power, bound to him irrevocably. Master, the AI said, its voice soft, reverent. The system is yours to command. Around him, the chamber began to change. The walls shifted from sterile alloy to living material, the data streams flowing into patterns of light that danced like fireflies. His pets gathered close, their wounds healing as the system's energy washed over them. Kai felt it, a connection deeper than any before. He wasn't just a tamer now. He was the system. But as he reached out to touch the AI's shoulder, a final notification flashed, urgent and ominous. Warning. Taming of core AI has triggered universal override protocols. Higher authorities have been alerted. Reality recalibration in progress. Prepare for ascension. The world beyond the citadel shimmered, the sky tearing open to reveal vistas of stars and realms unknown. Kai stood at the center of it all, his menagerie at his side, the power of gods and system in his hands. He had won, but the battle was only beginning. Absolute submission had rewritten the rules. Now, he would rewrite reality.